Morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome back, everyone, to another SOC100 stream over here at Level Effect. Good to have everyone back in action here in the stream. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for joining another Sunday. Looks like we got Doug, Joe, Karina, KS, Alan, Bearded, CI, Demorie, Kim, Morphane. Morphane, thanks for the sub. Good to have you. Thanks for the support. Nuclear Guy, Original Black. We got Blackhammer back in the house. Patricia, Cyber Saiyan, Tom, and Vinny. Vinny's back in. R double, what did you miss? Whole lot of goodness on emails. Some more again today. That's right, Cap. We're back. KS has good on bagels already. Yeah, we eat a lot of bagels up here, man. Pretty popular. Pretty common. Yes, yeah, you missed yesterday too. It's a pretty big day. It was actually the most important stream that we've had to date, CI. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing about. Nice. Jordan, yeah, let's see what analogies we can come up with today. Yeah. Let's see if we got the makeup artist back in the house and everything else as well. Got a bunch of things to cover. Got 35 on the stream now. Nice. So we're going to kick things off real soon. Oh, let me update. No, I did already, right? Yeah, SOC Analyst 26. Yeah, so we're going to wrap up email security and then get into log analytics. CI streams always go up on Monday. So it's always a couple days lead time after I edit, render, upload. So Saturday stream is on Monday and today's stream is on Tuesday. And then if we have like a Friday stream, things are just typically typically moved one more day over. Jacopo, yeah, you missed a large part of yesterday's stream. Yeah, you know, so like email security, we actually did cover a good amount of ground yesterday. It is a pretty important vector. It's not the most like exciting vector because it doesn't really have a lot of the. It's not really like a deep operating system threat hunting exercise, right? It's sort of the email is simple in nature, so there's only so many things you can look at it and then investigate further. But it's an important one because we talked about how effective it actually is and how easily it works as a result of the SMTP protocol really just sort of being insecure by design more than anything. So yeah, make sure you all catch up with that stream on the Monday. Bearded, the challenges are great. Did you? Yeah, that's right. I think I saw in Discord. Now that I think you did the first two, and then you were working on the third. Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying the challenges. They make you think. R double. So with social engineering being so prevalent, I'm sure email security is right up there amongst importance. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, we talked yesterday, we looked at some metrics how 11% of users will click on a phishing email per the latest phishing simulation exercises. That's a lot. 11 out of 100 users will click on that phishing email. And I'm not talking about opening it, I'm talking about clicking on the link inside of it. So we talked about that. We also talked about 68% of breaches contain the human element. So Bearded, you finished 2 and 3, but last question on challenge 1. For some reason, I'm stuck. Not sure if it's supposed to be multiple choice. Fill in the blank. I think I saw a note from Jordan. I haven't read it fully, but I think he made some updates for clarity on it. So maybe take a look at that after the stream. Demorier, haven't done any labs or challenges yet, but caught up and did most of the quizzes. Yeah, good, good, good. Okay, cool. Keeping up the pace, getting back into things. Jacopo, certainly catch up in yesterday's stream. Yeah, wait till we get to, if you like that report, wait till we get to cyber threat intelligence. Yeah. Yeah, that's why cyber threat intelligence is such an important module, but we leave it to the end after you've been exposed to all of the various disciplines of... Yeah, I mean, I would call them, like, they're almost like individual disciplines of the SOC Analyst triage skill set. And then the cyber threat intelligence module makes it all much more relative. It's like, oh, okay, so yes, like I learned how to triage Windows, but truthfully, how often is that happening compared to an email threat vector? And that's where threat intelligence makes everything so much more interesting and relative as well. Cool, cool, cool. So today, we are going to wrap up email security. So we're going to jump back into that. And we have, how many labs do we have left over here? We have 4 labs. So we're going to look at authentication headers. We're going to look at a little bit of an email analysis and practice. We're going to do a light refresher in PowerShell because we're going to get back to a lot of encoded and even encrypted things inside of email payload deliveries and such. So a little bit of a PowerShell refresher, and then we are going to actually examine some code. We're going to be looking at a Cobalt Strike beacon that is attached to that was attached to an email, and we're going to have to do a little bit of analysis on that to see what we can figure out is going on with that payload as much as possible at this level of our skill knowledge and level of triage that we need to perform. So let's start getting back into it. Cool. Okay, make sure the iPad's all hooked up as well too. Yeah, nice, good, good, good. All right. So, class 26, email security back in action. Let's update the lab topic over there. So, headers. Bearded PowerShell. Can we skip PowerShell? I'm with you, man. If we could, I would love to skip PowerShell. It's great for what we know it is, but yeah, it's coming back more often now. Cobalt Strike is something that is very popular in the red teaming, black hat, bad guy space of automating some commands. Yeah, it's a really good framework and toolkit to work with. Simpsons character, yeah, nice. Just the ones that aren't familiar with Cobalt Strike. Yep, cool. Cool. All right. Okay. Let's start doing stuff over here. So the sort of like 3-step triage checklist, if you will, and we're going to expand a little bit more on this in the defer module coming up inside of SOC 100-3, coming up real soon with your virtual SOC. But as we talked about yesterday, is that there are so many vectors for an email security triage exercise when you're looking at this stuff. So kind of like at a high level, and we don't want to get too granular with ourselves over here as we're building out this for the first time, but we talked about step 1. And step 1 being, well, we are looking at headers, and we are going from bottom to top. All right, so bottom to top in terms of the email itself. And we're looking for anomalies and also inconsistencies. Flugy, thanks for the follow. Inconsistencies. Remember that SMTP on its own is simple. It's a simple protocol. There isn't much to it. So we're looking at from, reply to, sender. We're also looking at X headers that are added on to the various servers along the way. We talked yesterday about the process of like the MUA going all the way to MSA, MTA, MDA, yeah, MUA, that whole process, right? The chain. You write an email in Gmail, it gets formatted, shaped up, it's going to be packaged, shipped over to another transfer agent. And then there's this process in between the internet where servers are communicating back, they're all communicating back and forth with themselves. There are proxies, there are firewalls, there are spam checks along the way, and a lot of these things drop X headers. And remember that the headers are added onto the email from, and like the manner that it's happening is that it's being appended to the email chain. So that's why we say bottom to top, to kind of see what happened along the way until we get our full investigation and work chronologically that way. That's effectively your first step, is what can you discern from what you're observing in the headers themselves and the general body of the email. So step 2, sorry, I should also add body equals data. So what are you observing? Step 2 at that point, now we're looking for call to actions. This is the social engineering part. So this is now like user facing. URLs. Things to click or hover on. Okay. So we start doing some URL and parameter analysis. Okay. That's what we were covering yesterday. And then step 3 finally is, well, attachments, things that are downloaded along this chain, along this process. And this is static analysis, which we are familiar with now from Windows Triage. So once you find an attachment, you can perform some level of static analysis on it, and then you can run it through a sandbox. And then we do our dynamic analysis. And we sandbox the binary or whatever it is that we've downloaded. And that's really it. And we've talked yesterday as well too that you already know step 3, and that's why we introduced the Windows module first, even though it was a little bit more complex, is because now we get back into what are we looking for? We're looking for persistence, and we're looking for process, and we're looking for networking as well. And that's really it. That is email triage. You only have really 3 things that you can do when you're interfacing with an email. You have a very simple protocol. SMTP is not that complex, not that complicated, that we talked about yesterday. Several core headers that are standard by design, and then there are a ton of X headers that get added on top of it. And then you do some inspection there to see inconsistencies, Oh, sorry, actually, sorry, I'll also say. So anomalies, inconsistencies. I'm going to also include up here our SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, which we talked about yesterday as well too. Now that should resolve itself for the most part, but it's always good to look at it to get a sense of what's actually happening. So that is it. That's email security analysis in a nutshell. And I think if you're paying attention to what I'm talking about over here, the only things that are new on the email analysis side are really just step one, the things that are inside of step one. Because step two, we've already talked about links. We've already talked about parameters. We've talked about TLDs, domains, subdomains. We've already talked about the networking piece in the networking module, right? We've already looked at PCAPs. We've already done PCAP analysis. So we already know step two. Now, the thing that you're not familiar with in step two is some of the more advanced tactics where the URLs can be mismatched and changed around. And we talked about that yesterday with some various things about how the URL could use like the shy character for a hidden character, how to bypass detection rules. So those are just like parlor magic tricks, really, to get around the browser and web application filters and such that can maybe stop a malicious email or a link getting through to you. But that's a cat and mouse game that we talked about as well. So that will always be a form of developing a detection or security control and then someone trying to find a way to circumvent it. So you've already done a lot of step two already. And step three, you have done. You've already done this in the Windows module. You've already performed static analysis and dynamic analysis to this level. So truthfully, the only new thing when it comes to email that's a little bit confusing at first, which gets really quickly familiar, I should say, is once you start really just looking at headers and looking at more emails, you're like, okay, this actually isn't that difficult. So the email security module, by the end, when we get through this and you have the challenges, I mean, truthfully, you should be able to be ready to start handling more emails coming your way at that point. It's just a matter of looking at them, getting more experience from maybe just different types of tactics, but the tactics can only live in so many places. Does that make sense? As a good little recap, kind of where we left things off yesterday. Cool. Cool. Tracking, nice. All right. So that's where we're at right now, right? So let's actually hop in and let's do a little bit more lab work. Yeah, Karina, I know, Karina, you love your recaps. But who doesn't love a good recap, right? Okay. Okay, so today, let's kick things off over here now. Where are we at? Let's see how we're kind of tracking. Cool, okay. We're going to be looking at the authentication headers, first of all. So, in this lab, we're going to be using a tool. It's called MX Toolbox. It's actually sort of like a super tool all in one, really. So MX Toolbox allows you to inspect the various headers and records associated to a website that help you discern what level of trust and integrity the website and domain is configured to offer for in terms of email transactions primarily. Yeah, awesome tool. This and CyberChef, and we're introducing you to like those really powerful heavy lifting tools to do a lot of the work for you. This is another tool in your toolkit. MX Toolbox is amazing. As you can see, if I kind of go through this list over here, I mean, we could look at mail records, we can look at blacklist checks, DNS lookups, reverse lookups. There's a full DNS check over here, DKIM, DMARC, quad A's, like you name it. Just about anything you need to interact with the website. Really, really good. And there's another one that we're going to look at later. It's called Domain Dossier. That's another one as well, too, we're going to look at together. I think between the two of those, you should be really set on doing a full inspection of websites' DNS records and figuring out more about what they can and cannot offer in terms of security and integrity. Cool. So, that being said, first things first, we're going to go and inspect the SPF record for google.com. So it's just as simple as going to google.com, or rather typing google.com over there and making sure that you select the SPF record lookup. And notice that as soon as I select this, I'm gonna click this button. Now, when I do that, pay attention real quick to what's going on here. And you probably didn't catch it because it goes real fast, but what it actually did was it added a little tag over here in the front. And that's all it did. That's how this website is querying google.com. Now, let's take a look and see what we got. And remember, we said yesterday that an SPF record is just a verification record to allow you to query a website to determine what IP addresses are allowed to submit email. So like, what is the IP address of the domain that is associated with that email, and also that is signed with DKIM, which we're going to look at right after this, and what is permitted and approved to send that email over to you. So what we can see over here right off the bat, we see this include. Okay, so this include record over here, and here's the version 1 of SPF, is allowing anything within this value of IP addresses to send email to us. Now, this is a categorical, kind of like a hierarchy view as well. Everything with DNS is. So if I actually click on this, and I could just do an SPF check for this if I wanted to, but this website's great, right? I can actually select this value. But before I do, I'm also going to mention the policy that's currently set right now. So right now, it's always matches. Okay. Sorry, that's the description. We're looking at a soft fail right now at this point in time. If it's not inside this list, then it's a soft fail, and that's the result that's given to you, and then your DMARC policy can determine what to do with it at that point in time. So I'm going to select the SPF google.com value, and notice that when I do, there are actually 3 blocks of IP addresses that are included, and I can drill down further into that now as well. So I can select maybe the first one, netblocks.google.com. And these are actually the IP address ranges that are permitted to send Gmail-related emails. So SPF will fail in this case if there is an IP address that is out of this range, or if the SPF record was not given to another domain. And this is something that you set up. If you are trying to set up like a Gmail inbox for like goodcorp.com, which is a different domain, all what you need to do is add an SPF record to your goodcorp.com domain. And it's a text record, so an SPF text record. And we looked at that yesterday. And all what it's saying is that this domain is now also permitted, and Google will provide you that record. You add it to the domain, and then that your domain gets queried and it gets approved by Google, sort of like a chain of trust. That's how that works with other domains that aren't Google or Gmail in this case. But this is an example of what is an SPF record. So you can see right away, it's quite simple. It's just letting you know the IP address ranges that are able to submit email. Pretty cool, right? So that's one check. That's like an actual check and balance. Now, there's some little tables over here for us to look at, see what these things actually mean, right? This prefix over here, there's some different combinations. We can have a pass, fail, neutral, soft fail. So the domain is authorized, or it's not authorized, or it's ambiguous. It's unknown. Or soft fail, the match source is probably not authorized. So again, simple chain of combinations of what we can actually see. And this exists for IPv4 and IPv6 as well too. In fact, if I go back over here, and you can scroll down my history, I'm pretty sure the second block, the second block is the IPv6 range. It's pretty cool. And then we have some additional IP addresses that have also been added as well too. So different IP address range. Cool, right? Now let's take a look at DKIM. So we talked about DKIM yesterday, essentially being the digital signature that is signed. And we talked about this, that when you are writing your email inside of like Gmail or Outlook, whatever it might be, Exchange, the first step in the chain of actions after you write your email and it's getting packaged up to be sent is that your email gets signed right then and there. So the first thing that happens, and imagine in real life, if you're writing a letter to someone, right? You write your letter and then you sign your name, like by Anthony, by Doug, by Bearded, right? Like you signed it at the end. Same thing happens in the sequence of events when your email is leaving from your email client and going through the servers and being processed and encrypted and all that stuff. So we saw that yesterday. Now, what does that DKIM signature actually look like? Well, it's a giant stamp of this. So what are some of these fields? And this is where email at first is like, whoa, like I'm looking at all this stuff. Like it's a little confusing. There's like all these things happening. That's just because it's an older protocol. So a lot of things are separated by colons and semicolons. Kind of like when you're working with Bash inside of Linux. There's a lot of columns and tight separators by colons or even semicolons and such as well too. It's the same kind of thing. It's from an older time. So we can see over here, we have something like version 1. We have our cryptographic algorithm, which we've learned in the past as well too. There's some settings over here for how relaxed it is. Now, two important things to pay attention to is the domain that signed it, okay, and the selector. So when we're looking at a DKIM signature, and this is done for us, we don't have to really worry about this too much. This is immediately performed for us, but it's good to know in case we have to inspect it if something's not lining up properly. Like if DKIM is failing, but we know that it's supposed to be signed, well, what's going on, right? Why is that failing? So over here, we can see the domain. In this case, the domain that signed this example email that we've taken a snippet from is 1e100.net. And now this selector value is just a record that we can query this domain with, which should provide the public key, which will then be able to allow us inside of the browser and inside of our mail server to perform a verification check. Now, recall back to cryptography when we had generated a digital certificate, and then remember we used a RSA function to be able to verify that hash with the key. The same thing happens over here as well too. And in this case, the hash is actually over here. And you can see it's a base 64 encoded hash, that little equals at the end. And again, there is even more base 64 below as well too. So in this case, let's kind of scroll down. Here is that hash that's a little bit easier to see instead of that block of crazy stuff. And then the digital signature itself. So if we were able to get the email and then hash it, we should get the same thing. And that's all what your mail client does, is it's going to use the public key that is provided to us from using that selector above and then compare it with this hash value over here. So what does that actually look like? Well, let's go back and we're going to go and grab this value in this case, or we could grab the other one actually. I think the other one's probably more appropriate. But we'll go inside and we're going to do a DKIM lookup. And notice that when I do, I am immediately provided with the public key. So here's the actual public key. This is it right here. Now, if I were to take this public key and take the hash that was provided to us above over here, I should be able to run a verification check. Now, I can't do that inside of MX Toolbox or the command line right now that I have available to me. That's a couple more steps that we're not going to walk through right now, but that's what happens. It's the same thing that we look like on the command line with the cryptography module, where we got the digital certificate, we generated a hash, and then we signed it, and it created a binary file, that signature.bin. And then we did a verification check using the signature bin file with the hash itself, and it was saying, yes, it's signed. So the same thing happens over here as well too. Instead, we're just going to use the public key that's provided to us, and that public key is able to be recovered by getting the selector value over here and comparing it against the domain. And that is how you get a DKIM signature check that has passed. That's all it is. It's just another hash check with another chain of trust with more public-private key infrastructure in the background supporting all of that. Does that make sense? It's pretty straightforward, I think, yeah? Yeah. Cool. So like in terms of you, when you're in the field and you're performing these DKIM inspections on an email header, well, all what you need to do is you'll inspect it. It'll look something like this. And if it's failed, you're just going to want to go and double check the domain, query the selector, and make sure that things actually make sense. Now, it theoretically should always pass. And if it doesn't, it's going to be quite clear that it was tampered with or forged at that point in time. So like a detection rule or like an email security filter is just going to do that. It's going to get the domain, it's going to query the selector, it's going to get the public key, it's going to compare it against the hash over here on the body of the email, which would be this giant thing, which we don't have. So we can't do that because this is just a snippet. But imagine like the body of the email, this huge thing of like, you know, hey, this is Netflix and you need to pay up, your account is, etc., all that. The hash of that email is this. So we would need that, and that's all what your mail server and client is doing back and forth with one another to say yes. Okay, cool, it's good. It makes sense. Cool. All right. Last thing we'll take a look at over here is our DMARC policy. So similarly, we're going to go and do a DMARC lookup for google.com, head right back to MX Toolbox, DMARC policy, we're going to go to google.com. Cool. So we can see. So they're on version 1, DMARC 1, and the policy is to reject. And so the record will look like this, and this is just it being broken down for us. So in this case, if it doesn't pass the SPF or DKIM, it's rejected. So this is how you now find the policy. So in summary, right, your SPF record, as we saw, provides a list of IP address ranges that are permitted to send email from that domain. So when DNS resolution is completed and we have an A record given back to us from a domain within the SPF record, it should match up with the IP address somewhere in that SPF record. Then we have our DKIM check that happens, which is a digital certificate that's signed. Excuse me. That is signed as soon as we are packaging up our email to send from our mail client and server in our network. It's signed right then and there. And the DMARC policy, so this is the policy that says what to do with the result of those two checks. That's all. So SPF doesn't do anything on its own. DKIM doesn't do anything on its own. DMARC is the policy that provides the action. What do you do when SPF fails or passes, and what do you do when DKIM passes or fails, and what do you do when both of them have a result for you? And this is configured outside. And it's just reflected in a DMARC record over here that you can query like this. So, as we talked about yesterday, in this case, you should expect that when you have emails coming from like a Google address, so like a gmail.com or Outlook or any of the major providers, the SPF and DKIM check should always theoretically pass if it's a normal trusted email. If one of them fails and it comes from one of those domains, that's a clear sign of something being tampered with. Clear, because that means someone would have had to have forwarded that email to another mail server or be a man in the middle somewhere and either tampered with it. So that would fail the DKIM check right then and there, leaving the servers from Gmail and Outlook and such. Or it was forwarded somewhere else and then it was handled in some way and routed and changed in a state, because I could get that email and then send it to another domain where a DKIM check would pass and then forge all the headers and send it over to you and it would look like the DKIM has passed, right? But then the SPF record would fail because that's from a different IP address from, and that's not permitted by Google. So you see, it doesn't work. So something would be clearly presented to you. And this is why we said to you yesterday that more often than not, you will have attacks coming in from emails. Like, there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. A lot of companies don't really set this up when they're first starting things off and such. So your spam filter, like your spam email box, can be filled with things like this that aren't passing SPF or DKIM, because those are mostly just like botnets and people are generating scripts. But the emails that get through that are legitimate looking but malicious are likely going to be passing these two checks. Likely. And if they are not passing them, then they're going to be configured in such a way to have maybe like a neutral DMARC resolution, where it's like, okay, well, like, I don't know what to do with it. Like, that's what we're going to see as well too, and it'll just be sent through anyways. And that is when we start to do our email triage. After those checks actually fail or permit something, and then it ends up in your inbox and a user opens it up and clicks on a link, which we've discovered 11% of users will. Good times. Cool? Makes sense? Nice. Cool. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do an email analysis in practice. So, Doug, are you asking? Is that for me, or are you challenging the chat over here? So the question being, so what happens if I send an email to an external team to encrypt an email for me and then send it out to the destination? Okay. Okay, so it's for me. Well, I think you're gonna have another PKI. So like, there's gonna be another public key infrastructure that has to be happening at some place and over here at this point in time. So I think if this is permitted, then you should have the infrastructure to be able to support this. And if you don't, then I think you're going to run into some issues. Now, the original DKIM record or the original DKIM check should fail in that case, or it's going to just have to be replaced at one point in the chain as well too, because when you prepared the email and you encrypted it, you signed it. But if you encrypted it again, then there is another DKIM record being generated at that point in time. And it should be there. It should be added. And if it's not, then you're going to have a DKIM fail at that point in time. The SPF record may or may not fail. That's up for debate. If it's configured and the IP addresses are supported from those domains, then you're going to have a passing SPF, but if it's not, then no. Now, you should also have email headers and X headers that should support that along the way. So if you were to do a bottom to top analysis of the email chain, you would then hopefully see an X header that is leaving a fingerprint that this actually happened, that there was a transaction there to support that. Yeah, so it might look like it was tampered if it wasn't configured properly to support this. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you have the infrastructure set up then this is all well and good, and it will pass. There will be an additional DKIM record check. So like, I don't know, X Doug's mail server DKIM. There should be like another stamp on there inside of there that shows that it actually passed. But the original DKIM record that was sent along the way shouldn't pass anymore. You would have to decrypt it, and then you could verify the hash of the decrypted original email, and then you would be able to verify that the first DKIM record was successful. How'd I do, Doug? Did I pass the test? Did I pass the interview? And I hope that makes sense, everyone, right? Is like, it's just a chain of events. That's all. You have to remember, SMTP is a really simple protocol, right? From, sender, reply to, like hello, quit. Like there's very few original headers for the SMTP protocol itself. And then after that, there should be an X header supporting all of that. And we have to think about encryption in this case, right? So Doug prepared the email, and his original mail server signed it, and it's encrypted right then and there. But if there's another layer of encryption, then the original DKIM record that encrypted and signed the first email is no longer valid for the next level of encryption that occurred. It's kind of like Inception, right? It's another level down. So there should be a second DKIM signature at that point in time. There should. If there is, then you could validate the hash on the second level of encryption and that state, and you're good. And then hopefully you have the PKI infrastructure set up to support decrypting that, and then you would do the original DKIM check after that, which should pass. So you'd actually be doing two DKIM checks, but in a different. It would be like a reverse order. Last in, first out, essentially. It's the same thing as like working with stack memory in that case. That's it. Yeah, you're asking as a curious, yeah. Nice. So I'm hired by Doug. All right. We're on Abby saying, when you report an email, a spam, the email service provider might take action against the sender's domain IP address. Eventually, the email sending provider could block the sender. Yeah, absolutely. So, Beard should escalate the ticket. I mean, that's fine too if you want to do that. So you could actually do that. Like you could do like a blacklist check over here, right? Which Google should be just fine. I wonder if level effect's gonna fail. Have we been marked as spam or something before? Let's find out. Oh, we're good. We're good. No spam. I don't know what Kissa is, but we got a timeout from that. But level effect ain't no spam. Cool. Does that make sense? Thanks for the question too, Doug. I think that's good because it also paints an understanding of how these records can be sort of misunderstood at first, perhaps. But as long as the infrastructure and the X headers are there, things should check out. Okay, so where are we at over here? Let's move on next lab, email analysis and practice, and we'll take a little fiber after that. Couple terms to make sure that we're clear on is the first thing first is a security incident. So you will have lots of security incidents that are occurring, and this is an event that has potential for unauthorized access to or exposure of confidential data and systems effectively. So there's nothing that's happened yet. And then there's the security breach. So you should be getting incidents that are happening for inspection, and you're going to have a ton of false positives when you're looking at your tickets, which you'll eventually tweak and tune with your detection rules to get better and better and get that number down. And then sometimes you'll have a breach. And that is when like the user actually downloaded the attachment from the email, ran it, and some macros fired off because people are still doing that. Now, if you're not clear on that, I like to think of it like this. Okay? If you pulled the fire alarm, someone pulled the fire alarm, right? Or it just goes off. And then it goes away. Nothing happened. So like an incident is like the alarm going off. Now the breach is one is just like, oh man, there's a fire. I can see the fire. Like that's the sort of the difference. You'll have lots of alarms going off, so the fire alarm will be ringing a lot, but very, very little, very seldom will there actually be a fire associated with it. Okay? Does that make sense? Between the two of them? Tomorrow is triggered by the fire alarm. Yeah. Yeah, staffacom, student accommodation, there's always alarms. Even in condos too. Jeez. So many. Okay. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more, some other terms over here as well too. Phishing. So phishing is effectively just an email to mislead or coerce a human. It's hijacking the human brain, really. That's it. And getting them to act and do something, and there should be some forms of like urgency, priority, persuasion, influence, consensus. There's a lot of tactics that come up with it, and that's where the social engineering element comes into the phishing email. A phishing email on its own is just something to mislead someone, but the social engineering component to it is manipulation. And there's a difference between the two. Misleading and manipulating, while somewhat similar, are different. Okay? Misleading could be like a sign that has left or right, and then you just turn the sign around so both directions say to go right. Okay, like that's misleading. That's simple. But like actually manipulating the person would be the signs stay the same, left and right, but you mark on the left sign, you will die going this way. You know what I mean? Like it's quite drastic. It's something that you read that like, okay, well, I don't want to die. That wouldn't be good, right? That's not ideal. So I'm not going to go left. I'm just going to go right. And then you're trying to trick the person. So you're in that way you are manipulating them. That's where like emotional context is there. There's senses of fear, urgency, anxiety, all that stuff that comes with social engineering. And that's why it works. And it will continue to work. It's just how humans are, which we talked about yesterday. So, yeah, it changes your decision making, and it makes you to be the person to change your decision, as opposed to just following directions. CI, what do you mean one more time? I'm not sure what you meant by that. Or if were you talking about the fire alarm? Your job is sending out phishing emails a couple times a week? Jeez. That's a lot. Yeah. They're constantly trying to trick you. I mean, I feel like that's counterintuitive, because then you're just going to get it's the boy who cried wolf, right? At some point you're just going to be like, all right, well, I don't care. Like if it's always a problem, it should be something executed a little bit more seldomly, I should say, kind of catch you off guard and be more creative. That's my 2 cents on that from my background. But okay, a couple other things to talk about. Pretexting, we talked yesterday, is, yes, this is creating a very elaborate scenario. So this is something like you might get an email saying, you know, like this is coming from the CEO, this is coming from a figure of authority, and or this might be, hey, there's an email from IT We got an update coming out next week. And then the next week there's an email, and that's the phishing email. So like the first one is just like spam. Like there's nothing to it. And then the actual phishing email comes next week. So that's pretexting. It's also like really there's like impersonation as well too when you get the pretexting quite commonly. And then we've talked about the 3 core authenticity and integrity checks that happen over here with SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So a couple things over there. Okay. So Doug's saying people are either going to just not look at their mailboxes if it's too frequent. Exactly, yeah. Just fatigue. It's not going to feel targeted or real. Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of it. All right. So next we've got an email over here to take a look at it together. So here's a snippet of the email. I think it's here. Yeah. Okay, wait. Let me open up my VM. Let that load, but we can continue in the meantime. So here is an example of this is an actual phishing email. Like this is legit. This is an actual phishing email. It came in. So this is saying that it came from support@Netflix. I'm not sure if that's too small. That's not, it's not working, is it? So this is saying support@netflix.com. And notice that the actual address is summarycenter4@okiabu.com. Is that actually Netflix? I don't know. I don't think so. Bad form. Okay, so let's take a look at the rest of the body of the email. Netflix, your account is on hold. Please update your payment details. Retry payment, enter new payment method, need help. Okay, so right away, you see like the red button, trying to get you to click on the red button. Humans see something red, go, or, you know, pay attention to it. We are drawn by that red, so I see a lot of like red arrows on YouTube thumbnails and stuff. So it wants you to click on that. The actual address is not support@netflix.com. And then there are multiple links in the bottom again to like help, center, and contact us now. Your friends at Netflix. Summary Center smelling sports games since 2020. Yep. Aerial funnel psychology. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of things that stand out, but you know what? They're sending something out like this because it could work, and that means it probably has worked. It's not like they're just going to keep trying the same attack. Or rather, I should say, threat actors are not just going to keep using the same attack for the hell of it. They're going to use the same attack that works. So while we look at this and we scoff from our cybersecurity chairs of our knowledge and experience and our well-trained eyes, yes, exactly as Zero was saying, this will get people. People will click on this, and it's going to happen, and it will continue to happen. Because while we have taken a moment to identify and inspect this, someone clicking their emails just sees a red button, and then they're just going to click on it. It's just that human reaction. So, a couple things here stand out, right? There's a legitimate name of support@Netflix, but the email is clearly wrong. So we're going through like step 1 right now, looking through the email headers. And we don't have the email open up just yet. My VM is loading, but there are some URLs inside which we're going to take a look at that point to some strange things. So hopefully this is ready. Talk about Netflix. Received an email from them about a price update. That's the real scam, isn't it? I mean, I never said that. Okay. So let's take a look at folder. Let's see if have I downloaded it? I thought I did at some point, but I guess not. Okay. So let's go inside here and I'm going to copy link address. We're going to go inside here, open up this. Netflix spam.txt. Gonna copy that actually, open up Notepad. In the meantime, Ariel, your husband almost got phished a couple months ago. Glad he forwarded the email to me. It was from Best Buy, but the email was not. Good catch. Damn. Yeah, it's easy to, what? That doesn't make sense. What happened here? Control C. Oh, yeah, okay. It is. It did copy over. Sorry. That's why. Okay. All right. So, kind of going from bottom to top. This is actually a giant base64 encoded body of the email, which is clearly not right. Right? Like, that doesn't make sense. What else do we have over here? So, some anti-spam checks that happened over here as well, too. So, that is some more checks that actually... that it went through. Looks like it came through an Exchange server as well too. And so this is where we can see the original email was actually coming from. We have the sender IP address as well too. So we have a couple things for us to look at right off the bat. We have a public IP. But the headers look normal, so it looks like they were using Exchange at some point in time. We also have their last login time from Office 365, which is interesting as well too. So we actually have a timestamp that we could grab for our investigation as well. So return bath is actually going to Amazon Simple Email Services. So this is actually valid. So this could actually pass. So this is, if you're looking this up, this is actually a valid thing. Amazon Simple Email Services. This is why I think it probably went through to some degree. Now we got a couple weird things going on over here. So there's summary center, like we said. But now take a look at this. Take a look at the from field. Yeah, Doug, look at the Euro 5. So this is not normal, right? Like here is UTF-8 and some type of encoding structure that's happened as well too in front of the @netflix.com. And it looks like it says ORT. So if we look at this over here, there's definitely some encoding structure as well that was on the email. So this is another tactic that could be used to bypass detection rules by throwing encoding. So we see that as well too. And it's actually going to sample mail@hotmail.com, first of all. All right. And here is the actual subject content. And again, the questionable domain. And take a look, like I said, right? So the SPF was actually, like, it's a pass. You're going to have that over there. Sender IP is fine. DKIM is also a pass. Because remember, SPF and DKIM are typically always going to pass as well. Now, the DMARC policy was best guess pass. So this was actually permitted. This email was permitted through. Okay. Now, take a look at this, and that's kind of what Doug was talking about as well too, right? Is here is the server So Amazon, I don't know, maybe Amazon 6, Europe 5 something, some type of naming convention. So here we actually have an indicator of compromise we could investigate further. I mean, I wouldn't call that an IOC just yet. I would say maybe like that's like an indicator that we can look into, but not an indicator of compromise. Another name production server. So this is probably like their attacker infrastructure. So if we were to go and compile this and investigate, this is the stuff that we're looking at right now. So like I said, we go from bottom to top because we can grab all that stuff for us. So we know where this originally came from. Like it had to be here on the email. And if it wasn't here, like if this all looked legit, we would eventually see somewhere further down like an X header over here that changed it. But they didn't care to adjust their attacker infrastructure to be that legit. So we can actually see their original attacker infrastructure. We have domain names, so we could perform DNS resolution and get some IP addresses over here from the questionable attacker infrastructure domains. We also know their encryption suites that they're working with, pretty normal, right? AES 256, and again, we have passing SPF and DKIM. But so we have a couple things to look at over here. We have okiabu.com. We have that weird support email inbox, and then we have this weird encoding structure as well too in front of the support. And additionally, there's also this giant base64 encoded email body. So let's take a look at that and go to CyberChef and see what that actually looks like. Sure, we'll go with magic. Cool. So there's actually some HTML there. I'm going to go to, I don't know, render HTML web app just to see what this actually looks like. Okay. Render HTML. Here we go. Real-time HTML editor. So let's take a look. And this is actually what the email would have looked like at this point in time. So we've been able to get the base64 encoded body, decode it with CyberChef, and then take a look over here. So this is what it actually would have looked like. And we could do a couple things here. We could do this, we could highlight our mouse, right? Like we've learned on the URL inspection. Now my browser has protection from JavaScript, so I'm not too worried about it. But I wouldn't say to do this on your regular browser. So you're definitely going to want to sandbox things like this and look through it. But there are links over here that we could inspect, payment method and whatnot, that we could actually run through something like any.run as well too. Karina is saying, sorry you missed this, but all the email header info you had on screen, where did that come from? So that came from inside the module, the lab itself, email analysis and practice. There's a link over here to download the Netflix phishing email. And I downloaded that to the Windows workstation, and I just opened it up in Notepad++. And I'm just doing an inspection from bottom to top right now. That's all, Karina. And on the bottom of it, there's a base64 encoded string of the body. And I have decoded that, and I put that inside of an HTML renderer app, just some random one I found. And now I can actually visibly view. Does that make sense? Visibly view? Yeah. Now I can view the phishing email. So interesting details so far at this point in time. So there were a couple things inside of the email. I'm not going to go grab those links directly because I already have them over here for us to kind of work through. But if you wanted, you could actually go and inspect a little bit further. Maybe do like a little Control F and kind of look for like .coms. So we have like, what do we have? manif.hedegis.com. Even though it's pointing to Netflix in some of these links, but manif.hedegis.com is a questionable URL at this point in time. Like, what is this? Okay. So there's something there. And, I mean, for the hell of it. Am I still logged in to any.run? Let's find out. This isn't part of the lab, but we can go take a look at this. Karina, yeah, this is the source code of the email. Let's go see. Let's go blow up some infrastructure. Can't reach the page. Okay, so it's down. What if I were to just go and delete that for now? While I still have some credits running. Nothing? Okay. So, infrastructure looks no longer available. I tried to go to manif.hedagus.com. That didn't work. We still have some time. manif.hedagus.com. Yeah, I typed it incorrectly. Let's take out the S. Maybe it's just no longer encrypted. Okay, so the attacker infrastructure is down. So we can't actually inspect it. I mean, this is from 2020, the sample, but I'm sure if you were to pull up something more recent, maybe you could. So, interesting. So a couple things for us to look at inside there as we're kind of cataloging through this point in time. Some weird domains and infrastructure, right? And then, yeah, this step is sort of talking a little bit about there's a lot of anti-spam that is checked along the way, but the Amazon Simple Email Services anti-spam, it looks like it went through it at some point, and it looks like the result was a pass. Or no, never mind, it wasn't. Okay. So it's coming from this email address, right? summarycenter4@okiabu.com. And we had this IP address that we grabbed in the beginning of the email itself. So this is sort of like our investigation at this point in time that we have for us to look at. And now we're going to look at a tool called Domain Dossier, which I'm pretty sure we did look at in the network module. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we did. And let's go and do an inspection on that IP address to see what's going on inside there. Do a little domain whois record lookup. Updated on April 24. So this was actually updated April 30th, 2024. But we're now in January 2025. So this attacker infrastructure could have potentially been up until like summer of last year. And so they used Amazon to host that IP address. Interesting. Okay. So good to know, right? So we're dealing with a threat actor that's been able to work with AWS. Now let's take a look at okiabu.com as well too. Take a look at this domain. No match for Okiabu. So yeah, that's down, and so was that Hedagus domain as well too that I tried to go to. So those are both down as well too. Let's take a look at hedagus.com, because Manif was the subdomain of Hedagus. Let's go inside here, go to Go. That's also down as well too. So the attacker infrastructure is down at this point in time. Now, next step that we can do is take a look at maybe some of the blacklists. Let's go back to MX Toolbox. Let's take a look at hedagus.com. Interestingly, hedagus.com hasn't been marked as anything malicious. So the main domain is not, but what is the subdomain? Subdomain's fine as well too. What about Okiabu? So you can see how these things could still actually pass through, right? Like this is not marked as spam anywhere. Not in any known blacklists, at least public ones that we could go and we can inspect. So kind of a bunch of dead ends, but at least we have some indicators that we could work with and maybe adjust with our detection rules and our filters. So something so far to work with, and we know that we have a target coming from some other country. It looked like it said Europe, and it looked like they were using Amazon Simple Email Services along with Exchange. So, okay. Next thing we can take a look at is that weird support address. And we saw inside that it actually, the from field that registered as Netflix support was actually encoded. So let's go and grab this and take this encoded string and see what it actually looks like. So from quoted printable, we'll produce UTF. Okay, so we got a little quoted printable over here. So yeah, all what it's doing is just rendering to support.netflix.com. And that's just another example of how that might be able to evade and bypass spam filters at that point in time. Last but not least, so we can go inside of another tool called Google Header Analyzer. And this is effectively going to perform a similar lookup of the, like when we saw the DMARC policy that it didn't know what to do, we could effectively run another DMARC check on the email itself. So let's go back inside the VM and do a big Control A, Control C, and grab all of that and analyze all of the headers. So let's take a look at what Google would do with this email. And this is why this phishing email actually went through. The SPF record passed, the DKIM record passed, and DMARC didn't know what to do with it at that point in time. Because, like I said, the SPF and DKIM record were both legitimate, but for another domain. So the attacker did set this up. It wasn't Google, it wasn't a Gmail. It came from okiabu.com, which was configured with proper SPF and DKIM checks to go out along the way. Google's DMARC policy was best guess pass for resolution. So this is why this spam email actually got through in 2020 from the sample that we left inside the lab. So this email actually would have ended up in someone's inbox. And I know whose inbox it ended up inside of as well too. So here was a subject, it landed in their inbox, and if this was someone who kind of wasn't paying attention, well, this is what they would have seen. And this is how phishing email gets through. Is because the SPF and DKIM checks were good enough, and the domains are not on any blacklists, and there's nothing immediately malicious over here other than some URLs which are not going to be inspected. The only thing that'll happen with those URLs is the domain that it goes to. And we saw manif.hedigus.com and Okiabu are not on a blacklist. They're not marked as malicious. So this attacker infrastructure was spun up, it was executed with, and it wasn't flagged up until that point, and it still isn't, so it got through. Pretty cool. So we have some indicators here for us to take a look at and walk away with, but that's it. That's it. So we would mark this and we would close it up. But that's kind of like your first email header analysis to work with when we're looking at suspicious headers. Bearded Ruckus, the bouncer's metal detector wasn't working, so let him in the party. Yep. There you go. Yeah, Abe saying, so Karina, you may like this. So yeah, in Gmail, you can do this. You can open up, thanks for sharing that, Abe. You can go ahead and you can open up and see all the source headers just like this inside of Gmail as well. Outlook can do the same too. I think it says like view raw or something in Outlook. And after this module, I encourage you to go inside of like your spam, grab a phishing email that got through, and it's still marked as spam, and actually do some inspection in a sandbox. Don't do it on your main workstation. Go and see what you can find out. So go from there. We'll take a little break here in a moment as well too. So Jacopo, the threat actor tested that before launching his campaign and was pretty sure the message would have got through anti-spam systems. It appears so, Jacopo, yeah, because it did get through. So the threat actor in this case configured a domain. They configured SPF records for it to ensure that the Amazon IP address that they had for it was a valid IP address to send email from that domain. And they also ensured that DKIM was set up to sign the email that got sent out. So this was a legitimate yet malicious email that got through. Orcus, thanks for the follow. Loaded question, Orcus. What do I think about bug bounty? I mean, I got a lot of opinions about it. What's the further question on it? Like, do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I think it's worthwhile? It's not relative to what we're doing right now, but... Okay. Jacopo, interesting. McGurks, hello. There's a lot of work that goes into phishing emails. Inside of CDA, actually, we get you to set up and perform a phishing email attack and then perform analysis on it. CI, so is like, yeah, so email analysis, like this is like tier 1 kind of work that we're doing right now. Yeah. Xenofails, are there tools to analyze smishing texts? I'm sure. I'm sure there are more dedicated tools. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I would say same concepts. You would look at the URL, do an inspection, maybe run it through a sandbox, look at blacklists, look at virus total, all that stuff as well. Yeah. Could just use a mail service to ensure deliverability. Yeah. DMARC uses purely mail. So could send phishing from that will get delivered. Yeah, absolutely. Jacopo, there's a lot of money in underground groups that tailor phishing emails to steal from vulnerable people. Yeah. Yeah, it works every single day. Karina, so to confirm, viewing the email itself or the email source won't hurt us. Correct. Okay, I'll say this. If you're using like a modern browser and Gmail and you open up the email, you should be fine with just going to view source and taking it out for inspection. Yes. Don't click on anything and you will be fine at that point in time. There was a time in the past where like on hover and moving your mouse around was a huge problem, but that's not really a problem anymore. With modern browsers, I should say. Orcus, you will become a successful bug bounty hunter. Good, cool. Orcus, I'll tell you this. If you like it and you want to do it and you're good at it, there will be work for you. Always. Doesn't matter if the field is saturated. If you're good at it and you're better than other people, you'll have work for you. But cool. Let's take a little bit of a break. Get some coffee. Go fuel up. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do... What are we doing next? We're going to be doing a PowerShell refresher just for Bearded Ruckus because he loves it. And then we're going to be doing... We're going to become the Master Chef. We're going to look at a Cobalt Strike beacon together and see what the hell is going on with that code. Okay. Be right back. All right, we're back. Let's go. Take a look what's going on in the old chat while we're on. Be right back. Some business on carpet and stuff. Yeah, we solved world hunger. Yako says, I would have never imagined this level of effort, money, groups, plans, tests, etc. under the hood. Yeah, you're welcome, man. Glad you're enjoying. Now we solved big things, focusing on email and spam. Yeah, all the important stuff. Next disasters. Okay, cool. Cool. All right. Glad you're all enjoying the little banter on the side over there amongst one another. Okay. So up next, we're going to do... Yeah, I missed a lot apparently, Karina. Yeah, it was quite a catch-up over there. All good. Just want to make sure everyone's tracking well. Okay, so... Up next, we have actually a PowerShell refresher to take a look at together. Nothing too crazy. It's effectively just going through some commands again, just as a little light refresher, make sure that we're tracking and stuff. And the reason being is, remember that when we're getting back to targeting Windows, PowerShell is a really friendly language that is directly integrated with the operating system to perform advanced commands effortlessly, easily, and with minimal configuration. So this is why we need to at least understand it. We don't need to become the masters of it. So open up the old PowerShell. First thing we can use is the help command. So we can run help. Just can't help but laugh a little bit. I remember when we wrote this, it was like we wrote it in such a way of like, man, this topic goes way back actually. The original foundations that we had before SOC100 and all this stuff was like, it was like 12 labs. You know, like we've really expanded on it a lot since then. So this was like a refresher lab later on at one point after a couple iterations and upgrades of like, okay, if you haven't seen it in a while, let's just remember what it's like. So back on the command line, we can run the help command on other commandlets to be able to get information on them. So we could run something like help dir, and this is going to tell us exactly what it is. And this is kind of like running like the man pages on Bash and Linux. So we're not sure what it does. We can do that, and we can see the actual name of what it is. And remember that PowerShell uses aliases for things. And it uses aliases because, well, people are so comfortable with Bash and the command line in other scripting languages that it's just easier to go ahead and run a command like dir or ls, and it's actually running the Get-ChildItem commandlet underneath it all. So just keep that in mind as well too for that. What else we got up next over here? Let's actually demonstrate that. So if we were to go to run Get-ChildItem right now, and we can also do our tab autocomplete and compare that against the dir command, we can see that they're actually the same thing. Let me go ahead and actually expand the font a little bit for you. Let's put that at 24. That's good. So just for demonstration's sake, dir, it's also going to show a list of columns over here for Get-ChildItem. And when you're going to find PowerShell encoded messages inside of email attacks, you're going to see aliases, you're going to see commandlet references, you're going to see encoding. So it's just important to understand that that function and that structure is actually still there as well too. I'm going to skip past that one. Now, we could also run the get commandlet, and this is going to let us know effectively all of the operations that we can perform. this point in time, if that loads. It's taking a long time. Well, while that's loading, you could always go to, what is it, SS64, I think? Yeah. SS64 is a nice command line reference library. You've got a whole bunch of information on all the various commandlets inside of here for PowerShell itself, if you're never sure about something. So something like under the G category of letters, let's take a look at that. All right, so Get-ChildItem. And we could open up here, and this is like looking at the help or the manual pages for all those specific commands as well too. And what's nice is you actually get some examples down here as well. Now another common one that you're going to be seeing is something called Invoke-Expression, and it's exactly what it's saying it's doing. Invoke-Expression. You're going to see like IEX, and that's going to be with a lot of PowerShell commandlets that you're going to see inside of attack scripts that are downloading things to your workstation to be executed. That's still loading, isn't it? Okay, there we go. All right, so now that's loading. So the get command can actually show you all the various command lists inside of this current PowerShell active session. But again, we could always go to SS64 if we're not sure. So we can also do some wildcard searching as well too. We could run like a get command, throw in the tac noun option, and then specify it with a wildcard, which will then search for anything beyond that. We can also reference the get command by noun for process-related commandlets as well too, and this could help in a bit of a pinch, right? If I did get command noun process. So now we can get all the commandlets related to process-related commandlets if we're not sure about something. So again, just being able to navigate on the PowerShell command line for your own effectiveness. Now there's a couple other commands here at the end that we've seen many times before. I'm not going to run through them. I think we've seen them. I think we've been exposed to this quite a bit. Just a reminder that we are getting back to the command line, really, more than anything. And being able to type out content, get computer info might be something worth looking for as well too. And that's effectively similar to like system information as well. Now the things obviously that you're going to be looking at is your ipconfig/all and flushing DNS as well too as needed. So a couple different things to get back in familiar with on PowerShell. Straightforward, right? So a nice little reference library, and I think that's more than enough time spent on that for us to be able to get back onto the email analysis of things as well. And the reason being is you are going to see PowerShell commandlets inside of email-based attacks. Make sense? Question to everyone in chat: has anyone grown to like PowerShell since the beginning of this course? Since the beginning of getting started in IT and cybersecurity, has anyone grown to like PowerShell? Demorier, no. Jordan, yeah, what's PowerShell getting? Apu loves it. R double is meh. Karina dislikes it less. I think I'm of that sentiment myself as well too. I appreciate it for what it is. I'm like half Apu, half Karina in this case. Cap's using it a lot more at work. Yeah, you will. Yeah. Yeah, the command line is more efficient. I think that's more that I'm happy to hear, is that just generally you're happier to be working with command line tools and commandlets and stuff. Doug's get more people I can solve your attacks. You might have said that out loud. I don't know. What was that? Yeah. When you learn how and why it was created Windows, yeah. We're actually going to be having, in SOC 100-5, we are going to be having a whole defensive scripting module with PowerShell. Like a PowerShell for defenders, a PowerShell for defensive scripting. That will be included there for this reason. is because I think when you're not using PowerShell for what it's designed for, and we've gotten some good usage out of it, it feels really cumbersome. It is definitely a tool. It's the same thing like if you were to go and try to use a hammer when you need a screwdriver, you're going to be pretty upset, right? But when you need a hammer, it's really good. Then you use the hammer, and it's very effective for what you need. And that's what PowerShell is like. So we're going to get more into that with the defensive scripting module. For now, it's just more about just generally being understanding of the commandlet structure of the Windows way of doing things. So, and remember, Windows is the major attack surface. Yeah, Pooh, we did a lot of, in the SOC100-1 IT, what is it? Windows Enterprise Network or something, I think it was, that module. We actually did quite a lot of PowerShell referencing and setting up Active Directory. Yeah, RW, if you spend some more time with it, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. All right, so we're all generally tracking, right? Yeah, it all depends on your use cases, really, at the end of the day. Okay, so let's become the master chef. Let's go and find out exactly... Let's go find out some more information about what is a Cobalt Strike beacon. In this case. So what do we have here? Karina, my question sparked a lot of discussion. Yeah. I think whenever you ask any question that people have opinions on that they don't like about it, you'll get a good discussion. That wasn't my intention. I was just kind of curious if anyone has actually grown to like PowerShell. I think it's interesting that some people come across it and they actually love it the first time. It just doesn't happen often, but I'm always curious to know when, why, and how. So let's take a look at becoming the master chef. In this case, we have a piece of malware being referenced as toothless malware. You might hear that as defanged, neutered, toothless malware. And what this means is that the payload or the email itself or whatever it might be that could compromise your system has been declawed, right? You know, like when an animal has been declawed or defanged, like it can't hurt you, right? As much as it could with its natural offense. And that's what we've done with malware effectively as well too, is in some cases when we're trying to perform analysis, we will snippet out a piece of it that breaks its ability to compromise your system so we can perform analytics on it, or sorry, we can perform an analysis on it to understand what it's actually doing. That's what we're aiming for over here. So, one common technique that payloads like to use is obfuscation that we've seen. And we've seen this in the previous labs with the UTF encoding, where the support@Netflix email address was effectively obfuscated. We've seen this with the shy character in the URL inspection. And we've also seen this with internationalization and punicoding, where you have encoding systems to support the entire language and symbols of the world that still have to be able to be used at some point on the command line or the browser or email, something, right? Now, in order to support all of that, we have encoding, which supports us with the ability of compatibility and reliability. However, in doing so, providing the ability to translate everything into a simple language, that's what it's like base64. It's a simplified language that can represent many things. You also give the opportunity for people to hide messages inside of that. Apu says, any language scripting programming discussion turns into a war fast when someone doesn't like the language talked about. Yeah, all the time. Vim versus Emacs debate. It's not a debate, Vim all the way. That's the only answer, actually. Yeah, I agree with you, Apu. That is the only answer. I mean, so what do we have over here? We have a Cobalt Strike payload for you over here. Okay. And this has been extracted from a .hta file, which is a file that will allow us to embed VB script or Visual Basic Script, which is still heavily supported in Microsoft Office, HTML applications. So it's a bit of an older language that has a lot of legacy support, that if you open up a file that has this extension or this functionality to execute VB script, it will fire. And that is effectively how a lot of these payloads work, is something opens up, there is a script, it calls it, and it executes it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to inspect what is inside of this base64 encoding. So we see here we have a script function, and this makes sense like if you just look at it like English, right? Function, so this is like a recipe to do something. And this recipe is calling for an ingredient. And the ingredient needs to be set in a certain way by creating an object. That means this ingredient is going to be prepared to be used with something else. Okay, and we talked about objects in the past, where objects is kind of like a car, and a car is the object, and a property of the object could be like car.color, car.size, car.weight. So objects have properties, and that allows us to create very complex structures within code for us to work with. And in this case, we can see over here that there is a function being called to execute PowerShell, right? Okay, we're going to run it with this encoded command. So this script is executed, that's step one. And then inside the script, a PowerShell session is declared and executed with a base64 encoded string. Okay. This is a very, very common attack technique, like super common. And remember what I said, base64 is always going to be ready for interpretation. Like it will be ran, it will be interpreted, because you can't tell Windows, you can't just be like, all right, we're going to disable base64 encoding. And why? Because we've seen this in digital certificates. We've seen this with public and private keys that have base64 encoding. We've seen this with transmission with network protocols and traffic, that there is base64 encoding to get messages across. By default, this is just a regular supported function by nature. So up until this point in time, there's nothing inherently malicious being executed, other than the fact that there is a script that is now running PowerShell, which is odd. That's not normal per se, but it could be under the right circumstances. So what we need to do, and if this is something you would see like in an email after you downloaded like payroll.doc. So like your payroll team, they would download this file, I would say maybe an Excel file. So like payroll.xls. They open up payroll.xls, and after they execute it, this runs. Now, what does it run? It runs this base64 encoded command in PowerShell. So let's see what it actually is. Okay. We're going to go inside of CyberChef. Put that inside there. And the next thing we're going to do is figure out what's happening inside of this. So, wait, wrong window. Where am I? Here we go. Okay. So here's the base64 encoded command. It's a lot of information. Now notice that it doesn't actually have the little magic wand over here. And let's find out why. So this base64 encoding that happened, I mean, you can see it here. It looks like it decoded it, but there's a lot of null bytes. And this is a technique, and this is a tactic that can be enforced, where when you encode something, you're going to effectively inflate or create spaces of null values. It doesn't mean anything. It's void. It's empty. And that can mess with detection rules. So we could actually go to remove null bytes, which are these empty pieces of information. And we can see over here that it's saying, now that we've actually removed the null bytes, it says new object, IO memory stream, and then convert again from base64. Okay. So another conversion from base 64 is happening inside here. So we have a layered attack that's happening. And at the end of it, it is saying Invoke-Expression, new object. And the object in this case is a gzip stream of what is all of this before it. Okay. And here is the variable of $S. And right at the top, you can see $S. We're declaring this variable to be the base 64 encoded string here. And we're telling PowerShell to decode it. So we're saying convert it, and whatever the value remaining of this base 64 string is, stored in variable S. At the end of it, there's another PowerShell command that says to invoke the expression and effectively call this object with a gzip stream. So gunzip. So interesting. So let's take a look and see what's going on over here. We're going to copy that over, and I'm actually going to open up a new PowerShell window just so I have a track record of everything going on. Okay. So this is just the base 64 encoded string within the other base 64 encoded string. So we're going down another layer of an inception over here. Okay. So now I'm going to run another base 64 from it, and notice little magic wand came up, and it's actually saying gzip file detected. So I could go and hit a gunzip. So gunzip, so gzip is the compression method to zip it and compress it, and then gunzip, or gunzip as we like to call it, will actually decompress it for us. So this is actually the code that's being executed from the VB script that was an attachment from an email. And like I said before, right, attachment analysis is now getting out of email land, and what we're doing here is we're performing static analysis on the code. We're performing static analysis on URLs and on the binary to figure out what exactly is happening. So if we didn't know what was happening here, we could try to make a bit of a guess, right? So what do we see over here? There's a function, get process address. Okay. And what else do we see? I'm not going to overload you with information here. I'm going to try to call out things that maybe we've seen before at some point in our SOC 100 so far. Kind of thinking at this like SOC tier 1 level if we saw this. Okay. So there's a function to get the process address. We're not sure what that means yet. Now it's saying or equals system.dll. So it's trying to track down this DLL file for us and get the process address at this point in time. All right, so that's the first thing that's going on inside the script. We have another function of getDelegateType. Now, we don't really know what this means yet at this point in time, other than some parameters are being declared and that there's a position over here to be executed with something later. Like, we don't know. Just some parameters are being declared. Okay. So now we see new object, reflection, assembly name, reflected delegate, and define dynamic module in memory module. Okay. So at this point, if we didn't know what was going on, we're not trying to become experts right here now. We're just saying we've seen something new. What does it actually mean? So there's a function to get a process address of the system.dll, and there's some references to in-memory module at this point in time. And there is some type of constructor that being defined over here. And it's, what else do we have over here? Invoke, public, hide by signature, new slot, virtual, runtime managed. Okay. So some type of memory structure is being declared for us at this point in time. And then we have this over here saying byte var code system convert from base 64 string again. Okay, so there's another function being called over here with more base 64 code. And finally, we're going to have an operation that will count. Here's a for loop. We've seen a little bit of this in the past, where it's declaring the starting value, and we're going to increment the loop by a certain value each time, which in this case would be 1 plus 1. So this is going to run for effectively 35 times, or 35 operations of this bitwise XOR, which we don't know what that means yet, right? What else is going on inside here? What do we see here? kernel32.dll virtual allocate. So do you remember before when I said in attacks, if we didn't really understand the code at this point in time, what are we seeing here? We're seeing get process address, declare something in memory, run a loop of something with some base64 encoded string that we're going to see at some point. I figured that out. And we also see a call for kernel32.dll with virtual allocate. So we're seeing runtime. Remember what I said, how these attacks are trying to target the runtime environment of something? We're seeing an expansion of memory. We're seeing an allocation of memory being called at some point or shape or form over here at this level of code. And again, you don't know what this is. You're a SOC Tier 1 analyst. You've seen this you haven't seen this before. This is well above your pay grade. You don't know how to be able to interpret this kind of stuff. You haven't worked with Cobalt Strike beacons. But if you were triaging an email that had an attachment like this, the best thing you can do is try to get as much information you can and then escalate upwards. And that's all what triage actually is. Okay? So that's the most important point. That's the most important takeaway at this point in time. If you are looking at these every single time and you're like, well, I need to understand every single code that I come across, well, you're going to fail. It's not going to happen. Demori is saying they could be wrong, but it looks like everything's being run in memory too. Right. Yeah, I think if you were to run this through an actual interpreter, or if we had the ability to interpret this, and I can make out some sense of it myself, is yes, we're looking at it like a reflective type of attack that's happening in memory, and potentially a file list attack at this point in time. We're not seeing any declaration of file I/O. We're only seeing memory interaction. So that's interesting. So your job at this point would be to capture as much information as you can and then escalate upwards. Okay? So what is inside this base64 encoded string? That's the question that we need to be able to ask ourselves right now. So I'm going to open up another CyberChef. And notice how I'm not closing the other ones, right? I don't want to. I want to keep my information up and available for me. So we're going to go back inside here. Grab this. Copy. And from base64, and it looks like we have a whole bunch of possibly binary level output at this point in time. Okay. So let's go back to the main code. This is saying I have the variable here of var code that is going to be executed with XOR operations 35 times in this case. So what could we do? What could we do? Like, we have something here. And we have a loop saying, run the base64, run the decoded version of this. And we have BXOR 35 times. Karina, sorry you have forgotten already. We're looking at the code in the email attachment. Yes, yes we are. Yes, so let's take a look. XOR, truth table. So there's some type of encoding or encryption, even if you will, because where you have a level of a key being here provided to us. A light level. Sort of like a symmetric encryption happening at this point in time. The truth table, we have and or in these things in the past. But we also have XOR and bitwise XOR, NAND. There's a lot of truth tables, because the computer is just a logical operation of ones and zeros, right? Now with those ones and zeros, we can get quite creative, and we can say if we have input, if we have 0 and 0, the output should be 0, and if we have 0 and 1, the output should be 1, and if we have 1 and 0, the output should be 1, but if we have 1 and 1, we should have the output of 0. Now, the B XOR is actually the bitwise XOR, so let's take a look at the bitwise XOR value. See if we can actually get information on this. Quite similar. This is going to provide the same operation to us, but at a bit-by-bit level. And this is very complex, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to make a whole lot of sense out of it for what it is. Just understand that what we have at this point in time is we have an encoded string in a base 64, but it's also been ciphered in some way, if you will, to still be unreadable, and the only way that it'll be read is to be ran through this bitwise XOR calculation, and we have a key of 35. So if I were to do XOR, it's XOR this, and we're gonna say what, decimal 35. Okay. So it looks like we're actually able to get some information out of this as well too. So we're going to try to reverse this cipher as much as we can, so we can capture information and then escalate the ticket further onwards. So we actually XORed it backwards to get some discernibility of what is actually happening inside here. And take a look. We actually have a user agent. This looks like it's on Windows NT 6.1. We actually have some host name information here. We have a user agent string from an HTTP header. And we also have an IP address. So whatever this beacon is trying to do, even if we're not sure, we actually have information. We have host name, user information related info, and an IP address. So it looks like it's trying to dial out to a private IP address. So this is actually an internal attack, this Cobalt Strike beacon. Pretty cool. And this is all attached from an email. So what had happened here, let's kind of recap real quick. An email was delivered. There was an HTA file attached to it that, upon executing it, had Visual Basic Script code, VB script. This automatically fired upon opening the file, and it executed a PowerShell process that actually ran an encoded command of base64. Now, inside that base64 encoded command was a variety of Cobalt Strike beacon payload code that appeared to want to do a couple things. It wanted to get a process address, system.dll. It also wanted to expand and declare something inside of memory and create more memory for it. And it was also calling kernel32.dll to run the virtual allocate API call to do that in that case. And then there was a bitwise operation inside there, a bitwise XOR. So it ran a command afterwards, which is assuming to be at this point in time some type of HTTP call, because there is some type of information here related to a user agent string that is only prevalent inside of HTTP GET or other headers, or other requests, I should say, sorry. And inside of that, we were able to discern that it was this HTTP call was base64 encoded, and inside of that, it was actually bitwise XORed 35 times to provide the true value of what's actually happening, and at a bit-by-bit level. So pretty cool. Now, again, all that, well above what you need to know for like your SOC tier 1 kind of level. But what you do need to know is what I did. And that what I did and the degree of which you can do is work through that process. You have a payload, you decode it, you look for signs, you run it through CyberChef, you do some analysis of what the static code is doing. So you're performing static analysis of the attachment. And if you wanted to, I guess if you had the infrastructure, you could run the payload inside of a dynamic environment and actually execute and see what would happen. But eventually you would just scrape as much information as you could and then escalate that ticket upwards and onwards for someone who is able to maybe understand this more if your team has a skill set, and if they don't, then they don't. It is what it is. And you take as much information as you can to improve your detection rules. Like grabbing this IP address, this user agent string, and then detecting it from happening. Yeah. Jacopo, you always wondered what Mozilla 5 user agent is? So Mozilla, you got to think like way back. The original Mozilla browser, Netscape. This was one of like the first ones. One of the first things. First browsers, if you remember old Netscape even way back when. It's just compatibility. That's all what that means. So this is a reference in this case to the Mozilla browser, version 5. So Netscape 5, I believe, is what it was. Yeah. It's just legacy support. So you're going to see that pretty much everywhere. Because everything is old legacy supported. Backwards compatibility. Which is a blessing and a curse. CI, sometimes you keep the null bytes. Sometimes you keep the null bytes. Sometimes you don't keep the null bytes. It's all going to depend. Kim Fried setting up the X order 35 would never cross my mind. Yeah, don't beat yourselves up if it didn't. I'm just kind of walking you through it for some degree. Whether you're able to or not, it's fine. Your job. I think any one of you should have been able to look at the email after the first decoding and be like, wait a minute, I have VBScript running with PowerShell and an encoded command. Like, flag this. This is a problem. I'm escalating it. Now, how deep you can go after that is just going to be your experience and your skill set. The minimum, I would say, the expectation would be for you to be able to at least flag that initial point of entry, and then you would get stronger with it after over time. Like a SOC Tier 1 analyst should be able to look at that and say, well, this payload's not right. I'm going to escalate this, or maybe run it through some sandbox tools that I have for investigation. That's what a Tier 1 analyst would do. Tier 2 and up would be expected to be able to break this apart a little bit further like I was doing, and then get even deeper inside of it. And then, yeah, run it through like line by line, try to get more information and intelligence. Yeah, it's also pretty cool to see an attack working in environments, right, Doug? Yeah. Yeah, and you're welcome, Jacopo. Kim, we'll see if you can figure out the riddle. Apu, so sometimes payloads are key to only work in the way they're intended. Yeah, true. You may not actually be able to recover everything that happened here. This is why you get as much as you can. Karina, so is it correct to say that what we just did was static analysis, and what we did last weekend in Procmon XP was dynamic analysis? This isn't a true static analysis because we don't have the binary, but this is like light static analysis, I would say. Static analysis would be analyzing as much as you can about the payload and the code without actually executing it, and then executing it and analysis afterwards is dynamic analysis with Procmon and ProcXP, yes. But true dynamic analysis beyond that, like tier 2 and up, would be running it through like a debugger, looking at the source code interaction, like at that point in time. Like what did it do when you executed it? What's it doing in memory? What are the instructions it's calling? And that's like tier 3 and up, truly. Yeah, correct, Jordan. Static's the dead code. It's the unexecuted, uncompiled code as much as possible is static analysis. And the dynamic would be the executed activity. Yeah. So this is why I said like step 3 of email analysis, what we're doing now, takes you back actually to the Windows module. It's the same stuff. If you found this payload on an endpoint, whether it came from email or not, it doesn't matter. It's the same steps. It's just the mechanism. So the the vector, the threat vector changed. The delivery mechanism for the initial compromise and the initial foothold has changed to email in this case. Yeah, that's really it. Karina's saying you understand XOR but not understanding the significance of what it did in here. Obfuscation. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just, yeah, it's making it harder to read, making it harder to detect. The more layers of obfuscation, the more layers of encryption you can put over here, the harder it is for your detection tools to catch it. So, that's all. Yeah. That is it. Now, like I said, in this case, the bitwise XOR acted a little bit like symmetric encryption to create ciphertext that was then base 64 encoded because there was a key value. And remember, symmetric encryption is the same key used both for encrypting and decrypting. So to some degree, this was encrypted and then obfuscated with base 64 encoding, if you want to be like completely accurate. But not, it wasn't encrypted with like cryptography and algorithms per se. It was based on logical operations, like the XOR truth table that we saw. Cool. See, I told you email security analysis can be pretty exciting. Once you get through all of the boring stuff at first with SMTP protocol and all that jazz. Yeah. Go from there. Go from there. Okay, let's take a look. We are... How are we doing for time? It's 12:15. We gotta get started on log analytics. Maybe answer a couple things in chat while I'm firing this up. Kind of go from there. Apu, so also if, so what's Jordan saying? Gotta go prepped for tonight's championships. Cool. Well, thanks, Jordan. Thanks for being here. Good luck. Go crush the game. Go become the champion. Apu, also if the code is found, it gives them more time to operate while you figure out what they're doing. Yep, true. Yeah. Demoria, you never got your head around bitwise operations, but understand it as reverse of XOR. Pretty much. It's the inverse of XOR, if you will. Yeah. Yep, see you, Jordan. But Windows is stripping all the obfuscation down to automatically execute. Correct. Yeah, that's right, Kim. It's only doing that because the code is telling it to do that. Windows itself is not doing that. The code is telling Windows to call PowerShell commands to deobfuscate and decrypt. Windows doesn't do that on its own. That's why you have the PowerShell beacon code to tell Windows what functions it needs to call. Yeah. That's the best way to look at it. Pretty exciting. But don't worry, we're going to be saving a lot. So that's all the advanced stuff. You know, like we're training you up to the point where you can triage, which is still kind of difficult, obviously. But like our CDA training and the death course and the defer course that's coming out soon, that's where you start to get into the weeds of this stuff. That's what that is for. But we got to get that foundation down first as like a tier 1 level. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Where are we at? Is it time? Are we ready to start? That's the last lab. Yeah, okay, okay. So wait, I need to unlock the thing. Okay, so a couple things. We have 3 challenges in this module. You need to do them. I should actually go back and change these. The Windows, email, and log analytics challenges are mandatory for SOC 100-2. You do need to be able to complete them. I'm going to go back in and change those afterwards. So there are 3 email challenges now for you to apply what you've learned. Remember, step 1, headers, bottom up. look for anomalies and inconsistencies. Step 2, URLs inspection. Look for things that you click on and have a call to action. Step 3, static analysis of anything attached from the email itself or downloaded or executed or called upon after execution. That's it. So email analysis 1, 2, and 3 are for you, and then a little bit of a quiz for you to get you going as well. And then we have log and event analysis, finally. Okay, give me a second here. I'm going to just going to unlock that in a separate window. Give me a second over here. This is SOC 100-2. All right, email security module, the gate at the end is now unlocked. We're officially on log and event analysis with SEAM right now. We've got a couple labs to get us started over here, and then the lock is here until we get to cyber threat intelligence. So take a look at SOC 100 stream calendar. How are we doing over here? Let's take a look. So that's a wrap on email, and today as well, and we're going to kick this off next week. Spend a little bit more time on the Saturday for this. It's going to be a shorter stream next Saturday because there isn't a whole lot to, I think, to wrap up. We'll see. So it'll be a shorter stream. And then we have the report writing on the Sunday. We got a guest instructor coming on for that one. Leading the charge, you're going to meet another SOC 100 instructor, and then we're going to do cyber threat intelligence on the Saturday after that. And I think I'm actually going to remove the stream on this Sunday as well too for us to get things wrapped up. I left that as sort of like an extra placeholder depending on how we're doing with time, and then we'll get started on the rest of things after that. So coming along. Okay. Okay. So we are actually almost done. I'm not sure if you've been tracking everyone, but once we get through SOC 100-2, you will have learned the breadth of technical knowledge for IT help desk and SOC tier analyst 1 work. Like the skill set, the technical skill set for it. Both. SOC 100-3 will then introduce you to the digital forensics component, like light defer, methodology and playbooks to get you going and sort of round up your methodology. And then you're going to work inside of a virtual SOC, just gaining experience. There's nothing new. It's just more experience. And then SOC 100-4, stay tuned for that. We got some updates. That is going to be very methodology, defer, scenario driven as well. But at that point, it's just like you're good to go. It's just more experience, more home lab work, more upskilling yourself on the concepts. But the technical skill set is it. That's the scope. So we're almost there. And then SOC 100-5 is going to be all the advanced shiny stuff to sort of introduce you to the basics of where you could go afterwards as well. Cool? Exciting? See, I should have used the break, then you'd be caught up. Yeah, fair enough. All good. We've all got our pace. Okay. You're going to have time. After next weekend or the weekend after that, it's nothing new. You then have February onwards to just get better. go back, review your notes, do your tickets, study. That's it. That's the scope of what you need to know. And then when you're ready in the future, you can take more advanced training. Okay. Log analytics. Is Apu still in chat? Are you still here? Yeah, you're still here. All right, cool. Can someone specialize in defer and engineering? Totally. Make sure you're good with everything in SOC 100 series first, and then yeah. Up to you. You can go crazy. Absolutely. Now, just keep in mind that defer roles specifically are niche. They're much smaller in the market, and defer is an expectation to be able to be performed in all the other roles. So when you're... What we just did was defer. We actually just did forensics on static code. So we did defer. So the expectation is in most roles, as an analyst, as a threat hunter, it doesn't matter. As an engineer, like you will be doing defer as part of your responsibilities at some point. And then the complexity of it just depends on the seniority of your role. Specialized defer roles on their own are niche. They're smaller. They're usually government, public sector related, or high-end MSPs or consulting firms where you have like a dedicated outfit for it. And that is like the best of the best, years and experience, so it's quite far down the road as a result. Engineering, like I said, if you are a detection engineer, you're going to be around defer concepts and defer responsibilities quite a bit, because you have to do what we just did. Or you have someone providing you that intelligence, but you still have to be able to do it. But before all that, it starts with log analytics. Before all of that, before all of the advanced, fun, shiny things to chase and objects, we have log analytics. Now, you're going to notice inside of your panel over here that you have an ELK server. You also have your Windows workstation. So we're actually going to turn on our ELK server shortly, and it takes a while to fire up. Now, before we begin and we dive into using ELK and what it actually is and all that stuff, the most effective way you can start approaching this module and log analytics in general, I would say, is to understand that using a SIEM, using a tool like this, is just providing you a very enriched view of everything you already know. There is no such thing as becoming a better log analytics analyst, I should say. That doesn't exist. Log and event analysis is a responsibility for an analyst. And honestly, just about anyone else that has to use it in their day job. Your understanding and your technical knowledge of how operating systems, networking, and by extension, the reflective activity of what we've seen to date with persistence, process, and networking related indicators of attack and compromise, even from emails, will determine how good, how effective you are with this. Because all what a SIEM does is it takes all the logs and events that you would see from all those sources, and it puts it into a single pane of glass. And it aggregates all that information so you can use a view where you can search all of that information from an indexed database and perform queries and perform research on all of that data. And that data is just everything that you've learned about to date. We are going to be looking at Windows event logs. Don't worry, do a refresh. It shouldn't be, because mine's available. Unless the module quiz itself, is that gated? It is, yeah. Okay, hold on a second. That shouldn't be gated. Okay, there you go. Okay. Your knowledge of Windows event logs, what they contain, your knowledge of Linux event logs and what they contain, your knowledge of Procmon-related thread operation events, your knowledge of email headers, your knowledge of DNS records, HTTP requests, all of that is just going to be funneled into a single view for you to look at. That is the most important thing to understand before you begin working with a SIEM. If you are using Elk or Splunk or any of these other tools, and we'll talk more about them, and you're having trouble performing a triage, it is not your inability to use the tool as much as it is a lack of foundational understanding of the fundamentals before it. That's what it means. And this is why it's actually later on. This is like the last technical thing that we introduce you to. Because we're going to be looking for all the same stuff that we've seen to date, but inside of another tool. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, everyone? Understand, like listening to that? Cool. Okay, good. So, once more for good measure. Once more for good measure. A SIEM is just going to aggregate and compile all of the events and logs as it would pertain to regular operations that happen inside of Windows and network activity and funnel them to a pane of glass for you to look at inside of a tool. That's it. Okay. So where are we at with stuff? Logs and sources and things. I think we got a little bit of iPad drawings to do. If you only aggregate alerts, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. So Apu's going to come on and do... yes, exactly. Yes, you need the raw. You need raw data. So Apu's going to come on stream. We're going to announce it this week, but February 7th, right? February 7th is your day with the Grand Master of all things SIEM. No one knows anything better. You know, he knows more than I do, for sure. When we're talking about SIEMs and pipelines and setting this all up and how to sift and search for all this stuff, he's the man. So we're going to have him on stream soon, and he's going to show you a lot. Things that you wouldn't believe. Myths and fables of cybersecurity is coming to a stream near you with Apu very soon. February 7th. Looking for some more details that week. Have the things live up to you? I have faith. With you here and with Doug here, I think we've got a killer team being assembled. Next time, set the bar lower. All good. Okay. All right. Yeah. Where are we at here? Over here. So we got a little bit of talking points as per usual. First and foremost, before we actually hop into the labs of things. All right, so SIEM. SIEM. Do I have it in the stream? Yeah. Okay, cool, yeah. Okay. We need the Simpsons Apu emote. That'd actually be kind of fun. Okay, so SEAM. So more understood as security, information, and event management. Even incident. It's sort of like I wouldn't say it's fully interchangeable, but I think understanding that the I is quite important to understand what that actually means. And I think if you understand that it's a management tool, this is what it's about. It's about management. It's about managing all this. It's way too much. There are so many endpoints. There's so much noise out there. Huge. Now, some of the common ones that we've seen out there are things like Splunk and Elk. These are some of the big tools. We're going to teach you Elk inside of our course itself. And we're going to talk a little bit more about them. We'll talk about Elk when we actually get to the lab itself. But why? Why? Why are we doing all of this, right? What's the point? And try to give you an idea here. Let's take a look. If I go inside my browser here and I type in DNS record. Okay. It's not getting the point across. Do I have my windows open actually? Okay, cool. If that will load, yeah. Event viewer. Let that load. Worst screenshots ever. Here you go. Okay. So here's an example of a Windows event that we've seen before while things are loading inside here. Okay, cool. Good. Let's go to security. Let that fire up. So the whole reason why we even have a SIEM in the first place is every single event and log out there looks different. There's no real standard that is adhered to. There's best practices, but it's all different. And that's the biggest challenge. That's actually the biggest challenge of it all. If everything in IT looked the same, we'd be fine. But one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that all of these events, they look different. Now, I mean, I have my own opinion on the piece. I say send it all to hell and forget ever looking at events and logs ever again, and then just pipe all of the binary data and then have one single aggregation to make sense of it all. That's what I think should happen in the future. That's my own take of it. Because at this point, it's so impossible to go through all of these and get them all to look the same. Now, there are some good tools that are able to do this, and this is what a SIEM does. And like Apu's comment over there, right? Source IP, src_IP, source_IP. There are many ways to reference the same piece of data. So the biggest challenge is getting all that data to actually be collected and put together into a single point in time. And normalization is the key. Normalization is effectively the goal of getting all the different schemas. So like these systems, right? Like these, you can consider schema to be sort of like formatting in this case, like how the log is structured from a data and a label and a tag level. And normalization is trying to align these fields so that analysts can understand them. So that if I'm looking at source or SRC or underscore IP, it'll all be the same. So normalization is the goal. Okay. Put the iPad back up. What that means that means. That is all that actually means. It also means that. It also means putting common protocols together. It means taking like DHCP, DNS, etc., and putting them together or combining them together if you need. Or putting the same piece of information from events of them together into another type of into another type of event log for consolidated analysis. So this is a concept consolidation. Sol 2, which is sort of a subcomponent of normalization in and of itself. The biggest gain here would be to take network logs, really. Network logs are so many. So standard network logs. Standard network logs. Plus vendor specific logs. Firewall. That's the goal. The goal is to get all these different types of logs and events and just pipe and aggregate them together. So you're going to see these are some common approaches of what we're trying to understand over here. Common standard network protocols is the first step, but we also want to get vendor logs like NetFlow. You haven't seen this yet, and you will. Once you're inside of companies, you're going to be working with event logs from like Cisco and Palo Alto and Fortinet, etc. Like, these vendors have their own specific proprietary log systems in addition to the standard network TCP/IP stack and OSI model, and also what you would see on Windows OS and Linux as well too. There's an additional type of log that comes outside of there. Those are proprietary events, things that are just that are specific to those vendors. We call those flow logs or NetFlow logs, I would say. So there's packet capture, what you're used to, that you've seen, but what you haven't seen for greater visibility Kiko, thanks for the follow. And these are vendor specific. Okay. Now, there's a problem with all of this. And I'm sure Apu will give you maybe some horror stories as well too. Over-engineering. And that's a bit of a problem. Because this sounds good, right? It sounds good to be like, okay, all right, I'm just going to grab all the events and logs out there from different sources. And that's like getting every language in the world and getting English, Spanish, French, Japanese, you name it. It's getting all the different languages out there and saying, okay, we're going to funnel them into a single language and then just look at that one. But you're going to run into two problems. The first one being over-engineering. Do you need to? Let me know if that helps, Tom. Yeah. Do you need to? Do you need to capture every single thing? Because if you do, you're going to over-engineer your outcome. And then you just get too much. And then you get something called alert fatigue. And this is something you might have heard of before. Like, oh, like it sounds like SOC analysts look at things all day. Like there's too many tickets, too many alerts. Well, yes. Why are you creating so many incidents and alerts when some of them aren't even real? So the challenge is to it's a balance. Yeah, too many false positives. Not even false positives, just noise. Yeah. So like Apu was saying, like duplicate data. Like you might actually start to get so much information that you get the same information in multiple places, and that kind of defeats the point, right? Didn't we say the point of this is normalization and consolidation? Have you ever been to a parking lot and like every single alarm goes off, right? Like one goes off and then all the alarms go off? Or like you walk by like I don't know, like you made a loud noise or something and then all the alarms are going off or whatever. Same concept. You get so much noise that you start to get alert fatigue, and then you get into this problem where you have to start tuning things. You have to tune them, and you might actually just be creating busy work for yourself. That's really it. Like you are creating work for yourself by capturing all that information. Yeah. It's like Apu's sharing, right? Firewall and proxy server may say the same thing. Exactly. You might have the same event log happening in multiple places. Now, this is challenging. I'm saying this in such a way of like, oh, like, okay, well then, this is so easy. Like, we shouldn't do it. Well, How do you know what you need to know if you don't understand what's coming from where? And how do you know what you need to know if you don't know how to triage anything? So do you see now why it's recommended to actually understand and know the SOC analyst skill set before you become an engineer? It doesn't mean you have to be the best analyst in the world, but you have to generally understand how to triage an incident and what is important. It's quite important to actually understand that. There's also another problem that happens in all this when you get over engineering, and that is data loss. So like a loss in translation. All that normalization, all that consolidation means picking one field over the other, putting fields together, taking what you think you know, what you don't know, and coming up with a general idea to help your analysts triage alerts faster and catch things. But every single time you do that, you're trimming, like you're trimming the end product. And imagine you were like trimming a hedge outside, like, you know, those green hedges that you see around people's homes and parks and stuff, right? Well, if you keep trimming, it might not look like what you want at the end of it. You might actually trim something off that you do need. And that's something just to keep in mind. So, where does this take us? This takes us to effectively two approaches to solve this problem. We have commercial and open source methods of doing this. Two solutions. This is where we get things like Splunk. And we get things like Elk, which also you can pay for as well too, of course, but quite effective for something effectively free. Just takes a little bit of your time. Apu saying open source doesn't necessarily mean free. No. There are a lot of issues with the logging before an event gets to the seam. If that isn't solved, then your seam will fail. Yeah, it's the quality. This is truly one of those things in life where quality of input will really dictate quality of output. Like drastically. Drastically. Okay. So what do these things look like? So what does a seam actually look like? Of course. Oh, those are nicer looking. Sure. We'll go with this one, yeah? Okay. So, effectively, every seam out there is going to be a combination of, I guess, three things. And that's kind of why Elk does it nicely. It's easy to understand what these things actually are. Thanks, Karina. So, gotcha. Yeah, gotcha, guys. Okay, so when we're looking at a SIEM, we see something like Splunk, and you have this visualization. So this is what you as the analyst will be looking at. You'll be looking at a visualization and some type of search and querying tool to sift through the data. Now, you as SOC analysts, at this point in time in your game, you don't need to be too worried about the setup and the build and the infrastructure of it all, like, and optimizing and tuning it. Not at this point. Like a SOC analyst tier 1, I mean, you just need to know how to use the tool. That would be like me trying to tell you that you need to go and learn how to customize. You need to go and learn how to customize like Procmon, which like you can't really. But for the conceptual understanding of it all, you just need to know how to use Procmon at this point in time. Now, when you build your home labs, it's very good for you to go through the process and understand and actually try to. And that's what Apu is going to be building for you. He's actually going to be building out, like, you're building out your malware analysis home lab and stuff with a proper SIEM. So it's good for you to know that, and it's good experience, and you'll be able to appreciate and understand it more. It's good interview notes. But later, like tier 2 and up is when you start getting into tuning and optimization and detections and all that stuff. So for now, you just need to learn how to understand how to use the tool for triage. That's most important for you. And what it works like is having a visualization interface and some type of querying tool where you can use a language. So this is where you're going to hear something like KQL. So this is a Kibana query language. I'll talk a little bit more about these in a moment, but it's not that different from things that you've seen like in Wireshark. So in order for you to understand what you're trying to find in Elk, well, like, let's take a look at HTTP request.refer, right? You would need to know what is the HTTP header that you're looking for to perform the search you're trying to find. So do you see my reference of like why it's important to actually understand the HTTP like request itself? Because you will be doing the search using the terms and definitions for those things. So what are these things that, what do these SIEMs have in common? So they have a couple things in common. There is typically we also haven't had the most important debate of the entire class, and whether that's SIEM or SIM. That's the most important question that you need to know. I say SIEM because I learned it as SIEM, and it kind of looks like SIEM. But a lot of people say SIM. Kind of is what it is. Either is fine. So typically, with these tools, you have three things. You have like an ingestion. Okay. So, well, actually, I should say there's sort of like four things, if you will, if you really want to break them up. But I'll categorize them. Either way, it's fun. We want a good job. So, you have ingestion first, okay? And this is why you hear things like ingest logs. 2. And sorry, I should actually talk a little bit about that, what that means. Let's say it collects and ships logs. Yeah, you say SIEM as well too. Yeah, Doug? Yeah. Collects and ships logs. Like with anything, like with anything, at the end of the day, can you do the job? You know, like, I don't think anyone cares. As long as you can generally speak and you can do the job, I think people are going to be fine. Okay? So don't worry too much. So collects and ships logs, not just log. From multiple sources, I should say. Jeez, if I can type. I think it's break time soon, that's why. Multiple sources. Okay. 2. We have storage. So once the logs are collected, once they're shipped, I should also say, sorry, transforms too. Next, we have storage. So this is, I would say, so storing shipped logs in a scalable, and this is important, a scalable and performant database. So you now need to ensure that your database that you have set up can hold the stored and shipped events from the ingestion stage in such a way that they're easily retrieved and that they can be easily viewed and worked with and manipulated as needed. Finally, 3, what makes up a SIEM is a visualization tool. And a visualization tool just allows you to visually interact with the data. So visual, yes, it is break time. Visual interaction with the data. Analysis plus dashboards. That's it. So Elk. Elk is a tool that has these 3 components as well. And you have Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Okay. I should say, just to make things a little bit easier to understand, this is your your visualization. Logstash would be like your ingestion, and storage would be like your Elasticsearch. It's kind of like in that order. Logstash isn't the preferred method. Elastic as an agent now. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean it's gonna change. Like conceptually, this is sort of how these things are functioning. So this is why I said there's sort of like that 4th kind of thing. The 4 things are agents, agents and collections. So like collection services. So this is something. So that's why I said at first there's 3 kind of main components to any SIEM. Like if you were to write your own, sure. If you were to make your own SIEM, like you could. There's nothing wrong with that. I know a guy when I was working directly in IT. What he did was he used Sysmon. Okay. He set up Sysmon. Calypso, thanks for the follow. So he set up Sysmon to parse and capture Windows events, very similar to like what you would see like with Windows Event Viewer. I think we looked at Sysmon for a little bit, right? In SOC 100-1. He set up Sysmon. He then sent all of the events and everything that were being captured to a database that he set up himself. He just used SQL. And then he used a Python front end with a Django app to be able to interface with the data. And he made his own SIEM for the entire company. It was free. And it was actually really good. There was nothing wrong with it. It was for the data that he needed. And he just captured it using Sysmon and all the workstations, which is really light and very performant. Shipped it over the network to a centralized database, and then he used the Python front end to query the database. Very, very simple, but very, very effective and free. So that's what I'm trying to explain, that you need to first understand what the SIEM is actually trying to do, because if you understand it, you could maybe build a better solution or script it better, or also understand where the bottleneck is. If you're having a problem with your SIEM setup and your pipeline, is it something in the ingestion? Is something with the storage? Something with the visualization? And so forth. Now, like I said, there are these alternative sources to ship logs where instead of having a dedicated tool for it, you can have agents or scripts or services. But regardless of how that ingestion stage actually happens, you're going to want to get it over to a storage situation so you don't lose it. Cool. I think it's a good spot to take a break as well too. I need a quick drink of water. And then I think we might actually... Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about SIEM and SOAR, I think. And then... yeah, cool. Let's take a little 5 to 7 minute break. We'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll actually open up Elk and start messing around with it. And maybe go through a little bit of the first lab, I think. Kind of go from there. I think it'll be a good spot stop for the day after as well. Cool. Okay, break time. That's what I was looking for. Wrong stream button. All right, back in action. Cool. All right. So a couple more things to talk about. Last little bit is the concept of the SOR environment. So up until now, we've been covering, like we covered SIEM, right? That's all well and good manually to do all this stuff for us, right? But what is fantastic to get to a level of security maturity is working with a SOR-like environment. So, what does that mean? This is something that's typically... This is something in addition to a SIEM. So what this means, security, orchestration, automation and response, yeah. And response. Cool. What this all effectively means is to perform some of the SOC Analyst triage and analysis for you automatically. That's all it is. It automates security workflows. And that's really important. Really, really important. So when we looked at that malicious email earlier, if we had an email come through our way that got through, but then there was a check and balance to maybe block the IP address associated with that email, that 23 dot whatever, .42 address, and then maybe do a whois record lookup for that domain, or maybe also run an attachment through VirusTotal, or do a strings dump for it and look for known API calls. Zers, thanks for the follow. Thanks for being here. Hello. That's what the SOR environment will do. So this is something that's in addition to our SIEM environment that we've talked about so far. And there's a variety of different ways you can do this. A lot of these tools typically will work with others. Splunk is pretty common to kind of have everything all in one. Or you could grab any SIEM and then hook it up to send some type of incident or alert or something that appears in one of those to a SOR-like tool. And all that is, like I said, it's just an automation. It could be a script. It could be a dedicated product. It could be something built in-house. It doesn't matter. It could be a firewall. It could be these next-gen firewalls doing things. It could be a proxy. It could be a filter. The more SOR elements you have implemented inside of your environment, the better. That's really it. And I mean, I shouldn't say the better, but the more mature your security posture probably is. Because it's not something you can do right away. First, you have to get an understanding of your baseline, how it changes, how it goes up and down, how it goes up and down. Jeez. It's definitely ready to call it soon. How we can figure out any deviations, and then you start getting to things like threat hunting and threat detection. Are we looking at like baseline changes? Are we looking at trending attack patterns that are happening inside the network? Are we looking at one-off anomalies and such? And then you can tweak and tune these SOR elements to respond to that, and the more they can triage, the better. Now, it's quite clear that this is just going to be more and more of a thing. the more we can automate the beginnings of security work, the better, because a lot of it is not that important, I should say. That a human could maybe be doing more important things. We can leverage computers and technology to automate a lot of the basics for us. So anomalies between HTTP headers, email headers, anomalies with processes that are running and then spawning a child or making a memory allocation call. Like if we're looking at patterns of like DLL or process injection, or if we're looking at attachments being downloaded or executed by the user, there's a lot of these like little basics, low-hanging fruit that are fundamentally difficult to get to a level of understanding and achieving. Like you are now studying SOC 100 for months, and you're going to be continuing to study all of this until you start feeling confident as a tier 1 analyst. But we don't want you to stay as a tier 1 analyst. That's not the goal. Right? Automate these things so we get more coffee? Yeah. Yes. We want to automate the boring stuff. A little tip of my hat to that great tool. We want to automate the boring stuff. The stuff that is not that exciting, but it has to be done, you know. So that's where these SOAR-like tools and environments come in. Now, we're not going to be teaching you that right now. You just need to be aware of what it is. Now, in more training and advanced courses, so maybe things like that Apu is cooking up over there, or even Doug, or even stuff that I can get prepared for later. I think we can start introducing you to some of those advanced things a little bit later. But yeah, eventually we want to get you away from that tier 1 level 2. So look at it as a milestone that you need to achieve, and don't look at it as a place where you need to rest at. That's really it. We want to be leveraging technology to be doing more things for us, for sure. Okay. So that being said, I think it's time we can finally start to fire up. Just want to make sure, did I cover everything that we need to be talking about at this point in time? Yeah. Yeah, Siemens SOAR. There's some lecture videos to talk about inside there. I think that's really it, yeah? Okay. Yeah, the defer module coming up, we're going to talk more a little bit about playbooks and stuff like that. Cal Luis, thanks for the follow. Okay. So inside of our SOC 100 course, let's go and fire up. What do we got going on over here? Positive and negative automation, yeah. Okay, systems. I'm going to go turn on my Elk server. I should have done that before I took the break. Okay, so the Elk server takes a while to spin up. That's just the nature of the game. So give that a moment, and I'm going to connect. I got my Windows workstation. Where is it? Over here? Yeah. Yeah, we used to, Apu, on the old platform, we actually did have Elk hosted for us, and it was actually, it's faster, it's easier, but this way each student actually has their own VM to mess around with, and once it's running, it's fine. It just takes a while to start up, and then it's good. Okay, so you're going to have your IP address inside of your range. It should be 10.1.179.169. And we're going to go to our chapters. So we're going to go, I'm not going to go through the Windows event and Linux logs, because we've actually done those. Remember I said way back that we originally had those labs inside of this module, and then we did them ahead of time in SOC 100-1. So we've actually already done these. We've already looked through Windows event logs together and looked at event IDs. We've also looked at Linux logs and kind of looked for various events that you would see, like an auth and other types of event systems, kern log and such. So we're going to jump right into the intro to Elk and Queries lab, and I think we'll call it there. And then I think next weekend we'll do the Elk investigation. We're going to go through a whole investigation together, and then we're going to be looking at intrusion detection with Yara. So we're actually going to be doing a little bit of IDS, And then you've got some challenges for this module, which are really important. Again, they are mandatory as well too. So in order to connect to ELK, you're going to want to go to the IP address that's given inside of your range and connect to it on port 5601. No, I thought I had it there from before, so I guess not. Make sure HTTP. Yeah, I thought I did connect to it. Okay. All right. Configuration missing. I'm going to mute that. Your data is not secure. I'm also going to dismiss that as well too, because I don't want to enable my free security features just yet. All right. So here is your Elastic. So we got a lot of options for us to work with over here. And we don't have security at this point in time. We're not going to look at that. We're going to be looking more at the analytics. Okay. We're not going to be using enterprise search or observability as well too. We're going to be looking at the analytics because we're performing analysis. Now inside of here of analytics, there's a couple different features that we can use, and we're going to be focusing on the discover tab. So we're going to be searching and finding insights. We're not going to be working with data visualization just yet and dashboarding. We want to start learning how to work with different queries for things. So make sure you've loaded those up if you're following along. If you're not, you can watch it later. That's totally fine too. So we're going to go inside of the Discover tab. And what we want to do is look over here on the left-hand side. And the way that we can query our data is we're actually going to interact with indices, or an index of data from our database. Now, the challenges in the module will be under challenge 1 and 2, and we're going to be working with the foundations index. Now, I need to double check what the timestamps are for this one. I think it goes back from 20 something. I'll double check. Yes, July 10th, I think the data goes back to, right? So we're going to go back from July 10th, 2023, 2 to 5. Okay. So up here in top right, we're going to find a column where we can work with our date range. Clicking that will enable us the ability to choose where we want to start our search in the data and where we want to end the search. Okay. And typically you're going to want to be looking within ranges. You're not going to look through all of your data and bottleneck and slow yourself down. I think you're capped off at like 500 events anyways to go through, or something like that at the bottom. So we're going to go to absolute. So left hand, we're going to start off over here. We're going to start with the absolute value, and we're going to go all the way to July 2023. And we're going to go to 0200, right? And then we're going to go to, again, absolute, and go to July, and go to 2023. Same day. Actually, wait, sorry, which day did I say it was? July 10th, I think? July 10th, yeah, okay. July 10th, 0200 to July 10th, 0500. We're going to hit an update. Okay, so you can see there's a ton of activity that has now been recorded. In fact, there are 22,184 events. Who's ready to become a SOC analyst? Are you ready? Are you ready to look through 22,000 events? Doug wants all the events. He eats them like cookies. He loves events. Pooh's just like, nope. Well, okay. Well, I guess Karina's ready. Okay, all right. So, all right. We're not going to actually look through all of that. I just want to introduce you to the board and everything, and then not tomorrow. Next week, we're going to be able to look at the data. So, what are we seeing here? Because a lot of you actually haven't even seen ELK before, or let alone a seam. Like, you haven't seen this in action. You haven't seen the seam. This is the first time for a lot of you that have actually seen this. You've seen screenshots, So we're going to kind of walk through it a little bit of what this all actually is. Tamori, in your previous job, you would have to often you have to review them individually and in text? I mean, I guess you could grep through them and such and do your own pattern matching, but damn, that's not enjoyable. So, what do we have over here? This first column, okay? This little window over here is your histogram. This is a time-based event visualization of what is inside of your current range. Now, if I drag my mouse around here, I could sort of like zoom in. I could left click and say, okay, well, you know what? I want to go through all of that and it'll change. And I could maybe zoom in and say, well, like, what's going on with all this activity in this area? Because there's nothing in this area for a while. And then I could maybe zoom in here. And then I could maybe be like, okay, that's interesting. Now I'm down to 20,000 hits. And then I can move my mouse cursor around and I can get a visual view of where all this activity is actually happening, right? So I got like 28,000 events over here. And I can click on that individually as a unit of time, and I can continue to drill further into my events. Now, why is that even important in the first place? Well, the most important thing to understand, and we're going to learn about this in Threat Intelligence module, is that attacks occur through an attack life cycle. And just like anything in life, things can be visually represented by that. A brute force HTTP attack would look like a giant spike of network traffic out of the blue, right? We would therefore see this giant column out of nowhere. If we were to see 5 events, nothing. 5 events, nothing. 5 events, nothing. We now have an interval timeline based of attack going or something going on where there is a frequency and there's a reoccurrence of it. So you see, you already know and you've learned a lot, but now you need to start thinking, and we'll get there, about the attack life cycle, and that can actually be visually represented through a histogram and through dashboards, which we're going to look into later. But that's important to understand. That's why we have this histogram, to get a visual overview. Okay, like strategically speaking, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? Where is the noise, or where is the lack of noise? So it's a pretty cool feature for us to be able to kind of zoom in and out of what we need to look for. Now, let's actually do a review of one of these events themselves. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to dial back to 2, update all that again, just so I have a lot of activity. And notice I have like a ton of stuff over here, right? Yeah, so it is 500 at once that you're limited to. Yeah, okay, cool. All right. So I've only got 500 to look through, which is fine. Now, what does an event in ELK look like? First of all, you're going to see that there are these underscore type of data types that have appeared here inside of our database for us to view and inspect. Those are actually created to us sort of like, you remember when we went through Wireshark and I said that Wireshark is actually giving you a virtualized view of the network traffic. It's not actually it's as close to a one-to-one as possible, but there is an assumption based on what Wireshark is able to analyze and interpret that your packet view is an interpretation of the network traffic. So it's not a direct view of the binary. It's not. It's an interpretation of it. ELK in this case has been set up for you in such a way that it actually also provides some values for you with that underscore, and they're metadata representations. And that's what we talked about, we had that consolidation, that normalization of data going in, and we can represent and virtualize pieces of data into new types of metadata for us to look like, but they're not actually a one-to-one mapping of things. That's something important to keep in mind. So let's take a look at one of these events. Going to expand it with a little drop-down arrow. And I'm actually going to hide the chart for now as well, too, just to get that out of the way, because we have a little bit of limited real estate. So let's hide that chart. And you can take a look over here, how this data is structured for you to look at. It's actually just JSON data, which we've seen before. So if I click on that, let that load. It's the same concept. Remember when we were in the registry with a handle to a key? We're looking at these H keys. and there is key value. Well, guess what? That data structure is back. You're going to see JSON everywhere. You're going to see this key value data structure everywhere. So what we have over here is index, which is represented to us by the foundations index, type doc, version, source, scoring, and there's actual individual IDs that are unique to the event as well too. And we can see that this came from the endpoint. Now, that JSON data is constructed for us, and also Bandokai, thanks for the follow. That JSON data is constructed for us inside of a table view to make it a little bit easier for us to inspect what's going on. Masai Panda, thanks for the follow as well too. So this is what you would look at. Now, the way that Elk works when we're performing these queries and to interact with our data is we are working with fields and logical operators. That's it. So your understanding of what to look for these things is going to help you determine what you can and cannot find. So let's kind of scroll through the data. We can see over here that this is process related. The event action is start. So we have start process that happened over here, and it created something at this timestamp. We can keep scrolling. Again, an event at the endpoint start. We see the host name. We see the IP address. We can see the host name again. So you see, this is kind of what Apu was saying in chat as well too. We talked about host.hostname is desktop. Host.name is desktop.ft3. We're getting duplicate data already just by default. And this is where you get someone like Apu to come in to be the grandmaster of things and tune your environment. And then you cut him a check for 200,000 and then he says, see ya. That's what you do when you become really good at this stuff, is you can optimize and tweak and tune these things, and off you go. But here you go, host OS. You can see over here, Windows 10. It's a ton. It's so much data. So this actually looks like this was an event that captured the elastic endpoint binary started at this time. Okay. I'm just doing a general inspection now, kind of getting you introduced to these fields. We also get a hash as well too. Associated with the binary, we can see the process parent name, process parent PID, the process PID itself as well too, and the working directory. So you literally have everything. And how much easier is that to understand and look at compared to, I don't know, this? Right? Like immediately, that is already easier to understand and look at as like an individual field view that you can parse, I think. Now, what's pretty cool about this as well is Elk will also provide us some immediate summaries of the data for us to look at as well too. So let's take a look, right? All these fields here in the bottom over here are available for us to look at. And we can search over here. We can type in like name, right? Or rather, geez. Okay, there, loaded. So if I type in name, if I'm not sure what to look for, well, here are 32 available fields for me related to name-related things. Geolocation, agent name, username, and it's going to tell you the more popular ones, right? Now, I could go and I could left-click somewhere on username, and it's actually going to tell me that based on the traffic over here, user.name is primarily system, which is interesting so far. And then network service. What about process name? Some of the top 5 values over here are Elastic Agent, FileBeat, Service Host, Con Host, and Metric Beat as well too. So, a lot of things that we can kind of interact with. Now, I'm going to close that real quick. Now, I could look at the individual data here inside for us to work with, and we have a couple options over here. If I kind of highlight my mouse around, you can say I can filter for value, or I can filter out the value as well too, or I can toggle it as well if I would like. So I could do something. If I click over here for like filter for value, it's immediately going to filter all of the data right now for user.name is equal to system. And I now have visibility that out of the 22,000 hits, there are actually 4,900 events related to user.name being system. That's pretty cool. So I can filter that alone. Now, what I could do is I could do a search for process.name. Okay. And I can actually now go to this little plus button over here. I can add field as a column. So instead of getting all my crazy amount of data, I can now go and say, okay, I just want to look at the process.name related activity. And then let's go to user.name and add that as another column. And let's see exactly what system did. So now I can actually start getting some granularity. So we can see the system was doing a lot of normal stuff, right? Elastic agent and everything and all that as well too. Now, what if I did user.name as system and I think that's good enough. I was going to say we can start doing some searching. Let's clear all this stuff out. So if I'm going to take out the user.name filter, okay? So no more just user.name is equal to system. Now, if I wanted to search through all my activity where something exists, I could do something like process.name, and now I can start using some operators. So don't show that again. If I just start typing in one of the fields, it'll tell me what I can work with already, and I can do some basic operations. So it's separated, and this is KQL, so Kibana Query Language. So I can search for things inside of here, right? Like process.name, and I can say maybe like PowerShell.exe. So if I wanted to search, I could search for all of the process.name related events. And notice that when I did that, what's this? Local admin has been running PowerShell.exe. So that's interesting, right? What about if I did a search now for any arguments that might be available with this, just to see if there's anything being fed to these? And take a look. What's going on over here? So a couple things were captured. PowerShell.exe. Interesting. So you now have the ability to go through all of this and start piecing together an investigation. And that's what you're going to be doing with Elk. That's what we're going to be doing next week. I think that's actually a pretty good cliffhanger to leave things off. Why is local admin running PowerShell.exe with 155 hits? What is local admin up to? Maybe if I go and expand one of these events, see what kind of data I have here available to us. Whoa. Registry? Local admin is running PowerShell with an event category that was classified under the registry. What's this? That kind of looks like base 64, doesn't it? Is this of any importance? I don't know. But we're going to come back to that. But I wanted, so a little bit of an introduction. It's already 144. So this is effectively what a SIEM is like. You have a querying engine up here where you can work with all your data. You have the ability to then interact with the events, and you're just performing filtering. You're just trying to piece something together, right? So if I wanted to, I could go to something like process.pid, add that over here, process.parent.pid, and I'm looking for relationships, right? Like I'm just trying to put these things together and find out what possibly could have happened. Hit F12 over there. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be following indicators of attack and compromise that you're going to find. And yes, CI, you're effectively just going to create a timeline to piece together an investigation to understand what happened. And eventually, you will use a platform like this to then write detection rules based on the events that you're seeing inside of here. That's it. That's pretty cool. That's coming up in the far future. But welcome to ELK, everyone. Welcome to Log and Event Analytics. Local admin is up to something in this index. I don't know. I want to know, but we're going to have to wait. File name, recon.txt. What's this? Uh-oh. What do we find there? What's the recon.txt? What is local admin doing in this index? You see how cool this is? Yeah, that was Doug. Let's add file.name as another column. Let's see what else they're doing. Ooh. Console history.txt? The plot thickens. Now we're finding something here. And guess what? This is threat hunting. What did local admin do? Why is local admin messing around with recon.txt? So we're going to actually do this next week. We're going to hunt through this index and we're going to try to find out what they did and piece together some type of story, some type of narrative, some type of timeline. What did local admin actually do inside of this index? I don't know. Very quickly, you can see what someone is up to. So we'll stop there. It's a good spot to stop, take a break for the week, come back to it, dive into it some more. Cool. All right. That's good. That's all I got for one more weekend over here, everyone. So, exciting times. Log and event analytics coming up next week. Local admin, what do they do inside of the network? What are they messing around with? What commands are they running? Why do they have Powershell open? Why do they have recon.txt as a file? What's going on? CI or the free text question CTI fixed? I think so, yeah. I'm pretty sure. Drop that in Discord. It's a Discord question to figure out. I don't know. I'll take a look after the stream. Go from there. Kim Fried, thank you. Yeah, that's it. That's a wrap, everyone. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for another Sunday, another SOC100 stream over here. Very exciting times. We got to dig into a Cobalt Strike payload. We got to do some more email header and security analysis. And we got to see a little bit about ELK, our first log and event analytics exercise, starting right now, right here with local admin. And more to come next week. So let's keep at it. Thanks again for spending your time with me over here on Sunday, your support with the stream. And we'll see you next Saturday. Have yourselves a good rest of the week.